Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, hello, everybody. Happy Easter. So nice to be with you today. This is really becoming one of my favorite things that I do on the channel. It doesn't get as many views as some of my other videos, I will admit, but I really enjoy spending time with Johnny. I've just been such a pleasure to get to know this young man over the last several months. He's really intelligent. He spends a lot of time digging into the Bible, and he's really adept at discussing the particular topics that he focuses in on. One of these topics is going to deal with, it's kind of two parts today, because we've got the messianic prophecy that comes from like in 2 Samuel and in Jeremiah, for example, where it talks about the Messiah coming from the line of David and the seed of David. Well, that obviously doesn't happen. The other issue that we have here is that we get a contradiction. So you've got a failed messianic prophecy and a contradiction all rolled up into one. So you're getting a 2-for-1 deal today. And I'll look forward to hearing you guys' response in the comments. As always, we open up the panel for open discussion. You can talk about this topic or bring any topic to the floor if you want to. I am going to keep this one. I want to try to keep this around 3 hours today, if possible. I've been going a little bit long sometimes, and I have some other work to do at my real job at some point this evening. So if I could keep it to 3 hours today, that's my goal. But the conversation's going really good. We got a bunch of people. I might stretch it out, but we'll just kind of let it flow organically. So that's kind of the plan for today. So we're gonna bring up everybody. If I hit this button here, oh, that did work. I'm starting to get the hang of some of this stuff. So basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through the verses really quick, so we kind of have a basis for what we're talking about here when we talk about these prophecies, these quote unquote prophecies, Jesus, the Messiah coming from the line of David or whatever. And then Johnny B is going to get into the actual lineages. And you get these in Matthew and in Luke. And so there's going to be issues with both of those lineages. And I'm going to let Johnny do his thing and explain that to you guys. So before I get into this, though, let me just have Johnny introduce himself to everybody, just in case some of you are new here. And then we'll dig into it. So, Johnny, why don't you take the floor for a second here, brother?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Johnny. I'm an ex-Christian atheist.
Oh, your audio is really quiet.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Johnny. I'm an ex-Christian atheist. I've been studying the Bible for...
It's still really quiet.
Is it really? Huh, weird.
I don't think I have any... audio opportunity to... Let me try. Oh, let me turn up your mic volume here. Automatically. Okay, give it. Try talking again.
Hello?
That is a little bit better. Let me try to cancel out some background noise. So try it again.
Hello? Because my phone's getting hot.
I got your mic turned up all the way. There's a little bit of a buzzing noise.
Is there? Is it better now?
Boy, I can barely hear you. Well, maybe it's because my laptop volume is really low too, though. Actually, I just realized. Yeah, there is some kind of static. I don't know. Is your phone plugged in to a charger?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Just give me two minutes to say something.
Okay. Take your time. Okay, so let me sorry, there's some technical difficulties. That was actually good though, because I didn't realize I could control somebody's mic volume. So I just learned something new there. So let me pull Johnny down here. And let me go ahead and, well, actually, before I get it, I don't want him to miss any of this. So let me just go ahead and get into the schedule here. I apologize. I see Austin's in the chat. No, Austin, I've got you on the schedule for the last Sunday, I believe it is, of this month, which is the 26th. We're going to get into evolution. So just to let people know what's going on, next Sunday, I've got Dr. Carrier coming. We're going to be talking about objective morality. And I do have a couple questions about historicity versus mythicism that I want to ask. And then if we have time to get into that. And then the 19th, I've got A's philosophy coming back for part 3 of our discussion that we've been having on free will versus determinism. And depending on how that conversation goes, we may wrap that up or at that point, or we may end up having one final discussion. I mean, I'm in no hurry. I want the talk to flow until we get all the information out there. And it's been a fascinating conversation to have. I'm really enjoying spending time with A's digging into that. But I think we might be able to wrap it up next on that particular Sunday, which is the 19th. Then, as I mentioned, I've got Austin coming by on the 26th. I'm booked all the way out to almost the end of June. So I've got guests coming every single week. I'm not going to get into the whole calendar, but I think you guys will be excited. I've got some really interesting talks on the horizon. I will be doing a bonus episode this week also for any of you guys who are interested in checking it out. I'm going to be dual streaming a conversation I'm going to have with Khalid. He was here last week in our open panel. He's a Muslim, very polite gentleman, well-spoken. He was very patient. There was a lot of over talking and emotions were flowing high last week, and Khalid handled it very well. So, oh yeah, I can already tell that's going to be better. So anyway, yeah, Khalid handled himself very well. He and I are going to have a discussion on Wednesday on his channel. I'll be dual streaming it so you guys can catch it live. It is going to be a conversation. The title he picked specifically is quite provocative, and I'm really excited to get into it with him. It's going to be about what he calls the degradation of the West and Western civilization, and he's going to be targeting, I'm sure, morality, birth rates, marriage, divorce rates, things of that nature. So we may get into also some politics. And as you guys know, the ethics and things of that nature, that stuff I'm really well equipped to talk to him about. But politics I'm going to be a little bit out over my skis on that one. So it'll be interesting to see how that conversation goes. But there are some, when it comes to the culture side of things, the ethics and the culture and stuff like that, there is a real problem that I have identified, and I agree with where Khalid's at, and I'm sure this is going to be his position, that atheists kind of, as in general, seem to kind of be lost and looking for, so there's no community, there's nothing that brings them together, whereas religious people have these really strong bonds, and that he translates that to family bonds and other things. I think atheists can have perfectly healthy family bonds and family ties just like anybody else does. But when it comes to community, that is an issue. In fact, I was on Robin's channel last night. She had a great stream. She's a savage. I don't know if any of you guys caught that, but she went for like 8 hours or something like that. I can't believe she had enough strength, mental fortitude to do the stream for over 8 hours. That's insane. But a lot of cool people stopped by there. Simos was there. Austin was there. I know I'm missing so many names. I'm missing Maud was there. Big Bad Mama was there. I know Alan was in the chat. So many people I can't even. Spooky Bed Hair was there. I could go on and on and on. So it was a really fun show, and we touched on a lot of different things. Talked about how Jill and Toronto Bible Study are scared, and how they're misogynists who are afraid to let a woman moderate a debate over them because they have some issues with listening to what a woman says. Apparently, I'm not sure what their deal is, but that's typical fundamental Christian behavior. You know, cowardice, fear, hatred of women, disrespect of women. That's what you come to expect with some of these fundamentalists anyway. So if these guys ever do step up to the plate for this debate that they say they're willing to have, then yeah, I'm looking forward to dog walking both of you guys on biblical morality. Absolutely looking forward to that. So stop running away from Robin. She's trying to set up a date for you guys. I'm willing to bend my schedule around as much as it's reasonable to accommodate you guys, even though you guys said anytime, anywhere. Apparently that you didn't mean anytime, anywhere. So I'll set up a Wednesday to meet your needs, Jill, and we're going to do them both in May because I've got too much on my plate to prepare for a debate before then. But we'll do them both in May, and I'll teach you guys how to lose a debate gracefully. Hopefully, you guys won't cry about it too much. I know you guys are going to do reaction videos on your own channels, offering terrible, disgusting apologetics about why it's okay to throw rocks at little kids and women who have sex out of marriage and stuff like that, because that's how degenerate this religion makes you. But
test, by the way.
What's that?
On a faulty test, by the way.
Yeah, exactly on the wedding sheet.
Yeah.
The consummation of the marriage, and yeah. God's so good at biology. He kind of missed on that one though. But it's intelligent design. What can I say from the intelligent designer? Got to have that perfect mind behind this creation and all. So we'll get into some of that stuff. Looking forward to that. I was just kind of filling the airtime while Johnny was getting ready, and your volume is a lot cleaner and louder. So what I'll do is now we'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell people what you're doing on TikTok, and of course I'll get your links and everything plugged into the description of this video after it's over.
So hello everyone, my name is Johnny. I'm an ex-Christian atheist. I've been an atheist for a few years now, probably since I was like 18. And recently I've been doing streams on TikTok. I do streams like just pretty much almost every day, pretty much just whenever I feel like it, basically. Sometimes I do 2 streams a day. I'll get on for a few hours, get off, and then I'll hop back on later. But that's just how it is. And me and Objective have been doing this awesome series on the failed messianic prophecies, the ones that Jesus definitely did not fulfill when you go into the context of what they actually say. Today we'll just be going over some very simple things about how how the Messiah was supposed to come from the line of David, how Jesus does not fit that criteria, and then we're going to go into the broken genealogy of Jesus, where the genealogies that are presented in Matthew 1 and Luke 3 are broken, and that they don't really help anything.
Now, your mic is still staticky. I don't know what's going on with that.
Huh, weird. I do not know.
It was clean there for when you first came back, when you were first talking. It was really clean. Yeah, that is really messed up. Yeah, I don't know what that. I hope that. When you're not talking and I don't know if you're muting yourself, and that's what's making it go away, is when you're on mute, or if it's just when you're just not talking. But when you're quiet, whatever you're doing there, it is stopping that. Yeah, it's when you're muting yourself, it's stopping. There's some kind of feedback that's coming back through your microphone. I don't know if it's plugged into a charger, because a lot of times that can create some kind of static.
What about now? I just unplugged it. Okay.
I've only got a couple of mic settings that I can adjust for you. I can echo cancellation and background noise, and then the volume itself. And I've got all of them selected. Oh, that's louder. Yeah, that's a lot louder. Try saying something. No, there's something that's going on. I can barely hear you, and I've got my laptop volume turned up just to make sure that wasn't the issue as well. Do you want to try leaving and coming back to the studio? Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry for these technical difficulties. Chris, I see you in the chats there, brother. It's so good to see you as always. Yeah, I really liked your what you put out on your channel. So I hope you start doing more content, because I think you have a lot of really good things to say. And I think people would like to hear what you have to say. And in fact, you and I need to get together one of these days and have like a one-on-one conversation, have you be the featured guest, so that I can really get your undivided attention. You had a couple topics you wanted to talk about, and you can always bring those things up in the open panels. those open panels are for basically anything. Nothing's off the table as far as that goes. If for some reason, because my schedule, I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show, but I'm actually booked all the way out through almost the end of June with guests, which is nice that the show's become that popular, that I have that many people who want to be a part of it. I'm really surprised by that, to be honest with you. So, but it is getting kind of crazy because telling people I have an opening all the way at the end of June is they're like, what the heck? I got to wait that long to come on here. And again, the open panels are open to anybody, but if you want to be the featured guest and have a particular topic, we got to set it up in advance. And those shows are booking up really fast. Those spots are, I should say. Try it now, Johnny. Try talking now. No, I think it's actually worse than it was before.
Oh no.
There you go.
Okay, is it better now?
Oh my God, yeah. There we go.
Okay, maybe I just need to talk closer. I dropped my phone. Maybe I just need to talk closer to my mic like this.
Oh, that would be if that's hilarious if that's what the solution was, because it cut down the static quite a bit, whatever you just did there. And yeah, it's definitely louder, a lot louder when you talk closer. So let's stick with whatever you're doing now. Let's go ahead and run with that.
All right.
Let me okay, so let's go ahead and get into this. This is, since I'm sharing this on the screen here. Yeah, I am. So this is going to be the prophecy, the failed messianic prophecy that we're actually referring to comes from John, the Gospel of John. This is in chapter 20, and I think the prophecy starts around 42. Yeah, there it is. So here we have, has not the scripture said that the Messiah is descended from David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David lived? Now, remember that we just did, I think it was last week, actually, we did the Micah 5:2.
Yeah, the last time we did one of these, it was Micah 5:2.
Yep, that's right. So we already talked about coming from Bethlehem and all that nonsense from Micah 5:2. We've already debunked that. So, but this is the part where it talks about the Messiah, the part of that where it says coming from the line of David. Okay, and it says the scriptures. What they're talking about, the scriptures, is you've got three. Well, people like to say Isaiah is part of this, but I was looking back over some stuff, and that passage in Isaiah is actually referring to the remnant, the righteous remnant, not to the Messiah, which people get really confused about. And that is confusing because when you get into Deuteronomy, Isaiah 40 through 53, then you get different suffering servants. And so the righteous remnant is in that as well. So we did that video. It might have been our second video that we did. So go back and check that one out. I have a playlist with all these on there. But if we go to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah, this is chapter 33. Get rid of this craziness. Verse 17. This is obviously going to be speaking through the prophet Jeremiah. For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. And the Levitical priest, now 18 is not part of this particular prophecy that we're talking about, but it is an interesting one for later discussions for all of you guys, because when people talk about how Jesus, this new covenant, that Jesus is supposed to eliminate all the offerings, that this is because now there's no need for any offerings because Jesus is the ultimate sin offering. Isaiah here in chapter 33, verse 18, is one of the refutations for that, just for future reference. And the Levitical priest shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to make grain offerings, and to make sacrifices for all time. That is not a temporal situation. That's literally eternal for all time. Okay. And that includes the new heaven and the new earth. Yep. So you could use that as a reference for that. In 2 Samuel, you get another mention to what we're talking about for today. This is chapter 17, 12 through 16. And this is going to be the prophet Nathan, the Lord speaking through the prophet Nathan. And it starts down in verse 12. When your days are, and talking to David, of course, when your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Again, this is not temporal. This is literally saying forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will punish him with a rod such as mortals use, with blows inflicted by human beings. But I will not take my steadfast love from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before you. Your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. Okay, so that gives us the background for what Jonny is going to get into. And then we're for the Messianic prophecy, we know that the seed of David did not produce Jesus. And there's two really bad apologetics about this. And neither one of them actually match up with what we find in the Talmud or in any Jewish records, where the seed is not considered an adopted son, which would be the case of Jesus and Joseph, allegedly, nor is the seed passed through the mother. The lineage has never passed through the daughter. Even if you don't have a son, then your line ends. This is why sons were so important, why daughters were considered property, and you could sell them off into slavery. You could sell them off as sex slaves or whatever you wanted to, because the daughters were just property. The sons is where the lineage comes through. So I'll go ahead and let Jonny, let me just stop sharing this and pull up the presentation that Jonny has. And pull this up. Just bear with me, guys. Share this. And pull that down. Oops. Sorry, guys. Give me a second here.
I will say, just as a side note, that Objective is 100% right about Jeremiah 33. Jeremiah 33 indicates that even in the New Covenant there will be sacrifices from the Levitical priests, which means that the concept of Jesus being the final sacrifice for sacrifices, which is depicted in like Hebrews 11, cannot actually be the case, because God Himself, according to Jeremiah 33, says it's not the case. Says that the sacrifices will always be happening.
Oh, I see what I've done here. I've got this split up this. Okay, so I need to drag this over here. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, so that I can drag there. Let me bring this to the stage. Okay, and let me do this. Okay. All right, Jonny, go ahead and take over from here. Just let me know when you want to go from slide 1, 2, 3 to 4.
All right. So, hello, everyone. So, we're going to be doing the broken genealogy of Jesus. So, would you go to the next slide, please?
You're really quiet again.
Next slide, please.
Okay, you're going to have to try to focus on talking directly in your microphone, because I don't think anybody heard what you just said.
The next slide, please. Is it working?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. So, chapter 1, Gospel of Matthew. The genealogy for Jesus found in Matthew 1 is full of problems. Matthew 1:8. And Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat, the father of Joram, and Joram, the father of Uzziah. Joram is not the father of Uzziah. The author of Matthew left out 3 generations between Joram and Uzziah. He left out Ahaziah, Joash, and Amaziah. 1 Chronicles 3:11-12 says, Joram his son, Ahaziah his son, Joash his son, Amaziah his son. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired. Azariah his son, Jotham his son. So Azariah is another name for Uzziah. So between Joram and Uzziah, there are 3 people missing in the genealogy. He just left out 3 people. Next slide, please. Yeah. Matthew 1:11. And Josiah, the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. Josiah is not the father of Jeconiah. Josiah is his grandfather. Jeconiah's father is Jehoiakim. The author skipped Jeconiah's father. 1 Chronicles 3:15-16. The sons of Josiah: Johanan, the firstborn; the second, Jehoiakim; the third, Zedekiah; the fourth, Shalom. The descendants of Jehoiakim: Jeconiah his son, Zedekiah his son. So the author of Matthew just keeps skipping over people, or I have it written in the thing. So why does the author of Matthew keep skipping over people in his genealogy? Next slide, please. He's attempting to get 14 generations. The author of Matthew keeps skipping over people in this genealogy in an attempt to get 3 sets of 14 generations, from Abraham to David, David to the deportation of Babylon, and from the deportation of Babylon to the Messiah. Matthew 1:17. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah, 14 generations. So this should mean that he has 42 generations, 3 sets of 14, right? Nope. He double counts Jeconiah in the third set, so he's left with 13 names in the third set. So on top of skipping over people to get 3 sets of 14, he actually only has 2 sets of 14, with the last one being 13. 41 generations. Next slide, please. The genealogy also goes through Jeconiah. Oops. Matthew 1:11. And Josiah, the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. This genealogy goes through Jeconiah, which means Jesus cannot be the Messiah. According to Jeremiah 22:30, no man who is of Jeconiah's seed can sit on the throne of David or rule as kings in Judah. Jeremiah 22:30 reads, Thus says the Lord, record this man as childless, a man who shall not succeed in his days, for none of his offspring shall succeed in sitting on the throne of David and ruling in Judah again, or ruling again in Judah. Next slide, please. Conclusion on the Gospel of Matthew's genealogy. The genealogy for Jesus found in Matthew 1 is broken. It skips over a lot of people, double counts Jeconiah, meaning the third set is only 13 names, not 14, like the author was intending, and it results in Jesus being ineligible to be the Messiah because it goes through Jeconiah. And the genealogy for Jesus found in Luke 3 isn't any better. Next slide, please. Chapter 2, the Gospel of Luke. The genealogy for Jesus found in Luke 3 is full of problems. Firstly, this genealogy is completely contradictory to Matthew 1's genealogy. It traces Jesus' lineage through Nathan, not Solomon. According to 1 Chronicles 22:9-10, Solomon's lineage will rule forever, which means this genealogy also renders Jesus ineligible to be the Messiah. 1 Chronicles 22:9-10 reads, See, a son shall be born to you, he shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. Indeed, his name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel in his days. He shall build a house for my name. He shall be a son to me, and I will be a father to him. Oop, I accidentally went off the screen there. And I will be a father to him, and I will establish his royal throne in Israel forever. Next slide, please. This genealogy, because it goes through Nathan, changes a lot of the supposed ancestors of Jesus. It also changes who Joseph's father was. According to Matthew 1, Joseph's father was Jacob, but according to Luke 3, Joseph's father was Heli. Ooh, hold on a second. I was loud. I don't know what that was. Okay, next slide, please. I don't know if y'all heard that. I apologize if y'all heard that in the background.
That's the last slide.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yep.
So Luke's genealogy, and Luke, I forgot to read Luke 3:23 because I heard that noise in the background. It distracted me. Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his work. He was the son, as was thought, of Joseph, son of Heli. So this one is interesting because Matthew 1 traces Joseph to Jacob. It says he's the son of Jacob. But this one says that he's the son of Heli. So that's just two contradictory things. If you read some of Eusebius's work, he tries to reconcile this by making the claim that Joseph had two fathers, that he had a stepfather and a biological father. But I don't, as far as I know, there's no evidence for this claim. And so Luke's genealogy contradicts Matthew's genealogy and ends up with Jesus being ineligible to be the Messiah.
There is another correction I need to make also, because as you were talking, it occurred to me that you actually so the daughter can actually carry on the lineage, because I forgot about the clan. So I think there's a stipulation, and I don't remember exactly where it's at, but I do believe there is a stipulation where if the man did not have a son and he only had a daughter, that if the daughter married within the clan, then she could actually, because of their property inheritance, that way the family did not lose all their property and all their wealth and everything like that. So the daughter could actually carry on that line. But in order to do that, she had to marry within the clan. So I need to correct myself on that. But it's a moot point anyway, because neither of these lineages goes through Mary. That's one of the bad apologetics that people try to offer. But it specifically says, as Johnny has pointed out, that in Matthew, it specifically says that this is the lineage through the line of Joseph. And Luke says the same thing, that this is a lineage through the line of Joseph, who was thought to be the father of Jesus. So neither one of these is actually a lineage through Mary, the way that they're laid out here. But I just want to correct myself on that previous mistake that I made, because there is, and I should probably look up those verses and just attach them to the description or something like that, so people know what I'm talking about. Because I know there is something about staying within the clan because they didn't want the family to lose all their property just because they didn't have a son. So correct myself there. So okay, Johnny, go ahead.
So, just in conclusion of these genealogies, it seems that there's a big problem, is that neither of them actually result in Jesus being the Messiah. One of them traces his genealogy through Solomon, correct, that's correct to 1 Chronicles 20 through 9 through 10, that is correct. The Messiah would have to come through Solomon, but it also traces him through Jeconiah, and Jeconiah was cursed in Jeremiah 22:30, so that no man of his seed could ever rule on the throne of Judah or rule in Judah again. They just couldn't do it. They're ineligible, which means that Matthew's genealogy automatically just renders Jesus ineligible to be the Messiah. Then you have the other problem of Luke's genealogy does not even go through Solomon, it goes through Nathan. And Nathan, there was no promise to Nathan about the throne. So like Nathan, Nathan's throne was never established forever. So that's also a problem. And the genealogy, in addition to that, neither of them really end in Joseph because Jesus is supposedly born of a virgin, so it means that he's from Mary, not Joseph. So it's kind of an issue.
Yeah, you're exactly. It's kind of an issue. It's just those small details, about these unimportant issues about like messianic prophecies and who's going to be the ruler over Israel for eternity. I mean, just a minor detail there.
We got the apologetics in the comments already. I knew he was going to bring up this apologetic. No, rebuke. His father is Joseph. Well, his I guess stepfather, but there's no such thing as Mary in Luke 3, unless you think Mary was a Joseph, son of Heli. It's not Mary. Mary was Mary. Joseph was Joseph.
The other problem with that apologetic is, as we pointed out, that both Matthew and Luke specifically say it's the line of Joseph.
Yeah,
specifically. So you're reading into the scripture that something that just isn't there, that the authors themselves did not put in there. So you're having to make this apologetic to just try to harmonize something against what the text actually says. You're not being honest with the text itself and letting the authors and the text speak for itself. You're having to include these apologetics to try and overcome this contradiction. And this is typical. This is what apologetics does. You start with your conclusion and you read backwards into what you want you need the text to say to match whatever hermeneutics, whatever theological point you're trying to make, which is why we have tens of thousands of different types of Christianity. All of them think that they're the right version of Christianity, of course, and they all say they're using the Bible. They're using the same Bible and they are coming up with thousands of different conclusions. So it does create a problem.
And I like how Rebuke's in the comment, and he's like, he's trying to come up with these apologetics. He's literally running away from you and me. I told him to come meet me on my TikTok. He won't do it.
Oh, Darklight is here as well. Yeah, he's running now. I'm sure he would love to have a conversation about contradictions or something like that at some time. But what he's running away from me about seems to be this debate about biblical morality. So if he wants to, I've already got him several times now on live saying that he'll do the debate. But every time Robin tries to get a hold of him, he comes up with excuses like, oh, I won't let a woman mod over me. Or I told him, he said anytime, anywhere. And I said, okay, well, the days that work for me are Saturdays. And so he'd send me a thing saying, yeah, any weekday or any Sunday is fine. Specifically avoiding Saturday, the one day that I told him I wanted to do it. So it's really shady. It looks like you're being very disingenuous, but I'm willing to go ahead and make it happen on a Wednesday for you. As I said in the opening of this, Jill, I got no problem. I could rework my schedule. I mean, technically I could do it any day of the week, but I'm not going to do that to my employees. I don't think it's fair to them to make them rework their schedules just to accommodate something I'm doing for fun, basically. But Wednesdays, I usually do a light day at the office. And so I could make a Wednesday work. So Robin's going to be getting a hold of you, Jill, for a Wednesday. In fact, if you want to join this open panel, we'll set it up right now. I got a calendar in front of me, and we'll just see if you're ready to do that or not. The debate
now
on
he's
biblical...
lying about you. He said that he's not received a message from any of you.
Yeah, I know he's not exactly the most honest person.
Rebuke, you should really read Revelation 21:8 and what it says happens to liars. Oof. says they go to Lake of Fire.
Let me see. Am I still sharing this? I guess I don't need to share this anymore. I might keep it. Actually, I might keep it in the background just in case we need to reference it.
Well, give me your opinion. How to do this time? I know I'm a little tired, so I was mispronouncing some names there a little bit, but.
No, I'm just glad we got the audio issue fixed because that was really concerning because I couldn't hear anything you were saying and there was a lot of static and I was like, oh man, nobody's going to know what he's even talking about. And I didn't prepare any notes. I could have just gone off your slides though. You did a really good job with those. So I could have just used your slides and made the presentation myself, I guess. But this is really your baby. And so I think it's better if you do it because you were the one who's put the legwork into it and stuff like that. And I'd have to start looking stuff up to deal with the objections and whatnot. But
yeah.
But at any rate, so we are going to, I think, go ahead and open up the panel, let people come on. Jill, you can come on here and defend yourself and talk about how these aren't contradictions and get into all that, whatever you want. I'm sure you'll have some fun stuff to say. I see Chris is out there. I'd love it if you would come on here because I'd love to talk to you and figure out if we could set up a time to have a one-on-one conversation or get into some of that stuff that you had sent me a message about because I think that'd be a great topic. I don't know if you're available or not. Yeah, Jill, that's fine. We could sort that out right now. I'm gonna open up. Let me post this link here. We could just sort it out right now. We can get that date set.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add on is that the closest we ever get to getting like any information on Mary's family is that she's related to Elizabeth, so she's presumably at least possibly a Levite. She's related to them. That's pretty much the closest we ever get to her genealogy. Is that we're told in Luke that she's related to Elizabeth, who was a daughter of Aaron.
Okay, I'm putting this in the chat right now, this link. I'm going to pin it in the YouTube chat.
Hell yeah.
And then we can just get all this sorted out here. Okay, so that link is open to anybody. Jill, you're more than welcome to come in here. Chris, love to see you. I don't know who else is out there. I saw Dark Light. I think I saw was out there. I'd love to have you come in here. Oh, Dark Light. That reminds me. Jill and Dark Light were supposed to have I don't know about a debate necessarily. I don't think it was a debate. A discussion maybe would be the way to put that.
Okay.
About
no, we did. It was Psalm 22 that we did last time. That's right. I knew it was either Mike or Psalm 22. One of those.
Oh, that's right. We did. And then we did Micah the week before that.
Yeah.
Okay. Dark Light, so good to see you. You're another person I'd like to do a one-on-one with at some point and get into your theology because I find it really fascinating. Depending on what happens today, maybe I'll have a chance to ask you some questions about it and take some notes because I've actually been wanting to do that so that I could look over it when I have time. I'm not so distracted. And I do have a pen and paper with me right now. So, yeah, maybe we could get into that.
I got a whole bunch of stuff wrote up that I can send you on email. That's that'll be a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. That'd make it much easier on me. Yeah, definitely do. Please do that. Yeah, I really liked what so actually, before we get into it, why don't you go ahead and take a minute, introduce yourself to the audience. People probably know you, but just in case there's any new faces that watch this video.
Yeah, cool. I'm a non-Abrahamic true monotheist. Followers of Abraham are a blood cult of sin worshippers. Yahweh, Jesus, and Allah are desert war gods of hypocrisy, not the actual one true creator. The actual one true creator called on me to defy the broken theology of Abraham everywhere that I encounter it. I generally claim non-Abrahamic true monotheist, but I'm also more specifically developing my own theology. I do not believe in a supernatural God. I don't believe in supernatural anything. There's no such thing as supernatural. When you're saying something is supernatural, all you're doing is saying, I don't know how to explain that. And so that's not being able to explain all the mysteries of the world is one of the most natural things in the world. So the God I perceive is a entirely natural God. And another way I like to say it is all consciousness is an extension of the omni-consciousness. We are all co-creators within the Godhood. and as such, we are all God. We are all a living fractal extension of God. The God I perceive is intrinsically interwoven into all creation. It is not set apart from all creation like the followers of Abraham like to claim.
What's up, Chris?
What up, Chris?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
So, I mean, that's the basics right there. Let me try to find some of my notes. But so pretty much, I'm one of the few theists that will openly admit that I believe in imaginary friends. You'll be hard pressed to find other theists that will admit that. Most of them will say, "I don't believe in imaginary friends. My God is real." Nigga, please.
I love that how you say that. That's so funny. Okay, so Jill, just really quick, Chris, I want to turn the mic over to you for a second, but I just want to do some housekeeping. So, Jill, you're saying that you'll set it up anytime, anywhere. You're waiting for me to get a date. This is your comment right here. All right, and here's my comment. Here's my response to you. Right here. So it's on record. It's the internet's forever. May 13th, lucky number 13. I figured that'd be a perfect date. We're going to debate biblical morality. And Robin is the one who's hosting this and who's modding it. So that is the way it is. If you're afraid to have a woman as a moderator, that just speaks highly to what a coward you really are at that point. And if you think that that's unfair, you're welcome to come and defend yourself on either position. But I will be looking forward to seeing you on Robin's channel May 13th. And I think, what does that say? 9 p.m. Eastern. So I just picked a date. You told me to pick one. I picked one. Now it's on the books. So I guess, as they used to say, be there or be square, right? All right, Chris. So the floor is over to you. Please introduce yourself to people. Let people know what you've been up to. What if you're thinking about starting to put out some content on your channel, which I'm really excited if you do that.
Yeah. So how's it going? My name is Chris, but also Bionic Latino because it happens to be my handle. I really don't have I've begun starting to add to my channel, but I was always expressly not a content creator. I by the way, I don't judge anyone who is, but I just know I don't have the attention span to really cultivate a channel and come up with a logo and a theme song and all that stuff. You know what I mean? That's just not in my bones. I'm really more of an information seeker. I thrive on conversation. I thrive on hearing other people's perspective, and that's really why I kind of come onto these lives or participate in them, is simply because I like to get some of my beliefs and some of my thoughts challenged. And believe me when I say, based on those conversations, I've changed my mind about things, right? I think the worst thing a person can do is say, I know this and there's nothing you could say to change my mind about that, right? Because at the end of the day, there's so much this universe, cultures, perspectives, it's so wide, right? It's like going into this international cafe and saying, I'm only going to have a cheeseburger. You're really cutting yourself off from so many new experiences, right? So again, I say that to say that I'm more than happy to have these conversations. I wear my politics and my belief system on my sleeve, but I'm not really here to make content or get engagement or start a Patreon or anything like that. So again, that's just why I haven't really pushed my channel. Although I'm going to start to rant more, because I notice sometimes I'm driving and I have these what I call shower thoughts or driving down the street thoughts, where I argue with people in the comments. And I say, well, you know what? Instead of arguing with people in the comments, let me just kind of express what I have to say. And part and parcel of that, just my own personal stance, is I'm not an expert in anything. I'm a nurse. I have a high school background when it comes to history and civics and all that stuff. I know I was being groomed, if you want to call that. I used to be a church boy. I was being taught kind of as a youth pastor and everything. So I have an above average knowledge of the Bible and the biblical scholarship, but I also reject the Bible and biblical scholarship, because for me, if I'm not convinced by it, I'm not going to be convinced by it to believe in it, but I'm also not going to be convinced by it to say what's the saying? A claim is not evidence, right? So that's why I really don't get into according to Zechariah, this said that, and according to Paul, he said that, blah, blah, blah. If I am critical of the Bible, and if I'm critical of the biblical narrative, it's from an external, objective perspective, right? The question I might raise is, well, For example, the question of original sin. Why would God create a creation that could defy his will? Doesn't that kind of contradict the concept of the triumphant God, right? Notice I'm making that from a logical argument. I'm not making that according to this verse versus that verse. I really, my brand, if there is a brand, is I'm a layman person who comes in with no presuppositions. Convince me that what you're saying is true without relying on the circular knowledge of, well, this verse and that, right? Okay, that's a long-winded way of saying that I'm here for the conversation. I'm not here for the debate. I mean, I'm not here for the conversation. I'm not here for the fanfic, as I called it in the comments, because to me it's fanfic. So that's pretty much it.
Well, you do bring a lot to the conversation, and you really, I mean, as a quote unquote content creator, I guess technically I would fall into that mold because I have the channel or whatever. I view this as a community channel. I just kind of run the thing. So I think it's kind of just something we all do together, and everyone's welcome here, including Jill, who just stopped in here. Everybody here is welcome. We give each other pushback, and that's what this channel is about, is doing it respectfully. Which is why I'm so upset about the things I've been hearing from Jill in Toronto Bible Study. We're going to get into that with Jill's part of it here. I mentioned it, I've heard through the grapevine that you're saying a woman can't mod over you and stuff. That kind of sexist stuff really does bother me, because that's so disrespectful. But we'll get into that, and maybe Jill can tell me that I heard something wrong, and I'll have to apologize to him for misunderstanding that, which I'm more than willing to do. But Chris, you do bring a lot to just providing content as far as that goes. You make this channel so much better just by being a part of it. And so I think you have really good insight into a lot of things. The philosophical side of things, we've had some really great conversations, you and I. You do know quite a bit about the Bible. It's interesting because a lot of people who are religious, I see this more with Christianity actually than I do with other. I think Jews and Muslims and Hindus do a much better job of actually getting into their texts. But a lot of Christians purposely avoid the Old Testament. I hear Christians say this all the time. I don't read the Old Testament. I only read the New Testament. And it's really weird how they would want to just dismiss or actively avoid such a huge part of what the religion is supposed to be about. But that comes to, the Old Testament's tough to wrestle with. And there's, I don't blame them for wanting to avoid that kind of stuff. There's tough conversations to have around the Mosaic laws in particular, but not just that stuff that God has done throughout the Bible, allegedly. So you do have an above average understanding compared to the average believer, because you're willing to look through the whole thing. But so I appreciate you coming by here. Jill, you're up next. You're welcome to introduce yourself, tell people about your channel, where to find you, that kind of thing. And then we'll just start going around the room and have an open conversation.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is, they call me Jill, but my channel name is Rebuke and Reprove. So you can email me at rebukeandreprove@gmail.com if you want to have a one-on-one discussion with me on my channel. That's pretty much what I reserve my channel for now. I don't really do much videos or live streams anymore, but I did see the email. I just checked my email. I did find the email. So if you're up for, it says Saturday evenings in May. So that's not so we're in April. So you're not available until May, right? Is that right? Yeah,
and actually, technically, I'm really pushing it to even do that, because I'm just so busy with work and stuff. But I will make time in May. I will absolutely do that. I sent you a thing saying, or I posted a thing here, May 13th. Is that a good day for you?
That's fine. So if I'm running from you, I must be running from May, right? I must start running from there in the future, right?
Well, no, the word is that Robin's been actively trying to pin you down for a date, and that you keep avoiding her, is what I keep hearing.
Well, no, I just found the email actually.
Okay, that's fair enough.
But I did send you several messages.
I did get a message from you saying that you didn't want to do it on a Saturday. Well, you didn't say that specifically. You said you were available Monday through Friday and Sunday. You omitted Saturday, so that Saturday was really Saturday is the best day for me to do it. But I'm willing to do it to accommodate you, to throw
that's
to
fine.
Be generous.
May the 13th.
Yeah, May the 13th.
That's fine. After 8 p.m.
If we launch at 8 p.m., that I figure, is that good? I mean, really, I'm going to have to go into the office on May, so I just work around whatever time we set. So you can pick the time of day, as long as it's like sometime like during or after dinner time.
Well, that's fine. Saturday is fine as long as it's after 8 p.m.
No, that'll be May 13th is a Wednesday.
Oh, it's not a Saturday.
No, because you said you didn't want to do
Saturdays
Saturday.
are fine. Saturdays are fine as long as it's.
Oh well, Saturdays are fine. Then yeah, that would be better, way better for me because
Right.
I don't. I'm supposed to be taking Saturday off.
Yeah, Saturday
so-
evenings are fine.
Let's do the 15th. I'm sorry, the 16th.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so May 16th, and then is what did I say, 8 p.m. Eastern night? Yeah, it's a Saturday. Let's do 8 p.m. Eastern.
That's fine with me.
Okay, and Robin is the one who's setting this up and hosting it. So, and again, if I'm wrong, I'll totally, absolutely, right here publicly apologize to you. But word is that you told Robin, or that you said you would not let a woman moderate over you, or you were uncomfortable with that.
Well, I haven't told anyone that, but I did say that on my channel. Sure. But
Okay, fair enough.
I'm willing to make an exception just to prove you wrong again.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, then I'll give you half an apology right now. How about that?
Half an apology?
Well, yeah, if you did say it, but you're willing to let it happen anyway, then I think that's worth half an apology. Is that fair?
Well, what's the half an apology for?
You get the other half when the debate goes through.
Yeah, exactly. A down payment on it. A down payment on the other half when the debate goes through. That's hilarious.
Typically, half an apology is and that's it.
Right.
Well, I haven't done anything wrong, have I?
I would say so.
If you said that you wouldn't, on your channel or anywhere, if you said that you wouldn't want or feel comfortable with a woman modding over you, I find that to be incredibly sexist, and I do find that to be problematic. So that, if that's true, then I wouldn't apologize for my feelings about that. However, if you're willing to make an exception, then you deserve some credit for that. So I figured we could meet in the middle with half an apology. But if you'd like a full apology, and with the caveat that I don't think that that's appropriate mentality. I don't think that's healthy mentality, but I'm not trying to be mean to you or hurt your feelings either. So I'll apologize all the way then for you, and sincerely too.
Well, thank you for sharing your feelings and your subjective ethics. But I appreciate it. I appreciate if you didn't force your religion on me.
You can't read either. Can you believe that?
I know. No, I'm not forcing my religion on you.
What Christian, and
what is my religion?
You're what you just expressed. You're
it's not a
moral outrage. That apology is even.
Oh yes, well that would be ethics, and that's actually objective morality, that all people are equal.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so I'm a Christian, so I appreciate that. If you don't
we know.
Force your religion onto me, but
fair enough. I'll try not to proselytize too much, out of respect. And the other thing, speaking of respect, Jill, my understanding is that you go by Jill because Jesus is Lord. It's like an acronym for your name. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I even changed my navigator to a male voice.
Okay,
unfortunately, it's an incorrect name.
Jesus, it's an incorrect name.
Jesus is Lord is an incorrect name.
It came from Skylar Fiction. Skylar Fiction is the one who first called me Jill because he didn't want to say, on his live stream that Jesus is Lord.
Because he's not.
So he said, "I'm just going to call you Jill." And he thought it was funny at the time.
It is kind of funny. I like the graphics that you did for. I don't know if you created that or somebody did that for you, but your what do you call the avatar or your profile picture or whatever, that the calligraphy.
I found this online. I didn't make this.
Yeah, it looks good though. Even if I don't believe it's true, I do think it's aesthetically it looks really good.
Yeah.
So you and Dark Light are going to be having a conversation. Is that happening next Sunday?
No, he ran for me. He's like you. Pushing the date back.
What a liar too.
We'll be in next.
I asked for a rain change more accurately.
Debate.
I only had 2 days to prepare my notes, and I wasn't able to get my notes done in time. And I'm not going to come into a theological conversation with Captain Rebuke and Reprove without my notes. I'm not going to come at it half-ass. I was hoping you'd at least respect that I'm giving you the proper respects to come at you with, everything proper.
I appreciate that. It shows you respect me.
Well, yeah, I do. Like I told Captain Objective Ethics over here, we stayed up for 4 hours that night talking. So I do absolutely have a level of respect for you. I don't agree with your religion, but what I like about you most is your unwavering confidence and your answer for everything. I love that. That's great.
Well, Icarus
Oh.
was confident too.
Always be ready to give an answer.
Yeah, first Peter 3:15.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Jill, you definitely do have a reputation for getting in the ring and mixing it up, which is why I was surprised that Robin was having a hard time getting a hold of you, because now I understand if you're a busy guy and emails get lost in the weeds. I could totally understand that. I got multiple email addresses because of work in this channel and my personal life, blah blah blah. So I miss stuff all the time. So that's perfectly understandable. But yeah, because your reputation is that you like to get in there and mix it up. So that does deserve a level of recognition and respect, even though I think you're demonstrably wrong and highly confused about your position. At least you're willing to get in there and defend it.
Well, yeah, sure. So, so the topic was regarding the prophecy, messianic prophecy. So whenever I can, I'd like to respond to that. Whenever.
Yeah. Since you're the last one, you can be the first one to go. Go ahead, and I'll let Johnny and you kind of engage, and you guys can go back and forth. He's the one who made the presentation, and yeah, I look forward to just kind of listening to see how you guys handle it.
Yeah. So it seems as though I did listen to the presentation. I appreciate that. I've heard this argument before, but it just seems to fall on whether or not you agree with what scholar or which scholar you agree with, because the scholars do debate whether or not, or the certain interpretations of the text are valid. So there are several different views, basically, or theories as to how this can be reconciled. So to cling to one over the other, which in many cases are a minority view with the critical scholarship, I call it liberal scholarship, and then say, oh well, we have a problem here, to me is really not demonstrating. I think it's a bit disingenuous, to be honest.
Really interesting. So, Jill, can you show me in Luke 3 where it says Mary of Heli?
Well, it says a daughter.
Where? Where's it say
daughter
that?
of Heli.
Where's it say that? Because it doesn't. It says Joseph Tau Heli, Joseph of Heli.
Okay, I think I'll have to look that up for you, but
wait,
wait,
Jill. So you're making the claim that Luke 3 is about Mary, but you don't even know what it says.
Well, scholars make that claim.
Okay, well,
what
is their evidence for it?
I'll have to look that up to see what they actually argue.
Wow.
It might be. I think it might have been even from the Talmud. They found some evidence, some connections.
The Talmud is a later interpretation of the text.
It is, sure.
Yeah. Why would I accept a later recontextualization of the text over what the actual text says?
Well,
do you accept
there's an argument as to what these phrases actually mean.
Do you accept the Book of Mormon
that are used in the Greek text? So, because there was no Greek word for son-in-law, they suggest that Joseph was listed as the son of Heli because he became Heli's legal heir by marrying Mary.
I'm aware of the apologetic, but where is that in the text? In the text?
Again, to say it's an apologetic is to say that you're not doing atheist apologetic. So you're
I'm just reading what the text says, Jill.
You're right. You're interpreting the text.
The text specifically says Joseph Tau Heli, Joseph of Heli. It specifically says Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, as was thought, of Joseph Tau Heli, Joseph of Heli.
You're interpreting the text as you're speaking. You're interpreting from the receptor language, which is Koine Greek. Mm-hmm. You're the receptor, so you're not the language it came from. Your language is not the language it came from.
But when
the interpretation comes in, is where scholars disagree. So to cling to one, right? So to cling to one and say, "Oh wait, we have a problem," really is not moving the proverbial ball forward if you're looking for, a contradiction or a failed prophecy.
But it is though. See, this is the
Well,
thing. Is
no,
you
well,
want to
okay,
go is
we can agree to disagree. That's fine.
Jill. The thing is, you want to go outside of the text. You want to go to Christian scholars who are going to come up with all sorts of crazy ideas to try and reconcile this. Whereas when I read the text, what the text says, there's nothing in the text that would ever lead me to believe that this is about Mary. In fact, if you read some of the early church figures, do you know what their reconciliation is for the fact that Matthew 1 and Luke 3 have two different fathers listed for Joseph?
Well, yeah.
What is it?
Matthew Henry, J.C. Ryle, people who actually write written commentaries in the Bible.
I'm asking.
They argue that this was Luke's intention. They argue this is his intent. That was his intention to do that.
I think you're a little confused. I'm asking you a specific question.
Mhm.
Do you know what the apologetic Eusebius gives for the fact that Matthew 1 and Luke 3 have two different fathers listed for Joseph?
There are several theories. There's a Levirate theory as well.
I'm asking
Levirate theory. You're asking me about Eusebius.
If you don't know, you can.
Eusebius held to the same view that I held to, I believe.
No, he doesn't. False.
What does he hold to?
Eusebius holds to the view that Joseph had two fathers. He had a biological father and a stepfather, and that's why Matthew 1 and Luke 3 have two different fathers. That was his apologetic for it.
Well, that's fine if that's what Rome wants to suggest. But I like the Levirate marriage theory. I like that a lot better. It fits the text.
Where's that in Luke 3? Tell me.
It's a theory or interpretation that fits the text quite well. We would suggest. So again, all you're doing is you're taking one interpretation, you're clinging to it, and you're saying, "I like this one better because this is the one that I'm saying. This is what the text says." Also,
well, it doesn't though. I want you to show me in the text where it says Mary.
I've already explained it. I've already explained that in the Koine Greek did not have such terminology.
I'm aware.
So that is why. Okay. Then. So it's an interpretation. You're not accepting.
But where is that in the text?
Okay,
I'm not accepting your nonsense apologetic. Okay. No, because you're going outside.
Well, I'm not accepting your atheist apologetic. Why should I accept your interpretation?
You can be wrong. That's fine. You can go outside of the text to have your little apologetic, whereas I'll stay in the text.
We can both say you're using. We can both say we're both using an apologetic, so that's really not helpful.
No, I'm using what the text says.
And I'm using what the text says.
Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
When the Bible says that Paul sailed a compass, what does that mean?
Say that one more time.
When the Bible says that Paul sailed a compass, what does that mean? What is the text saying?
Sailed a compass?
Right. This Bible used a term, and you're interpreting it, and in English, for word, it interprets into a certain thing, word for word. But that doesn't mean dynamically. There's a difference between a dynamic translation and a word for word translation.
Two different things. Because
so if someone is using idiom, and in this case they didn't have a term for son-in-law, so they use this term, and you're interpreting that as well what it would mean literally word for word. Some scholars do not do that. Some scholars suggest that this phrase was used, this idiom was used because they didn't have such terminology.
Now, do you mind if I just
we're arguing that your interpretation is better than mine.
Just real quick, hold on, let me jump in here real quick, gentlemen. I just want to real quick. I really appreciate that you guys are keeping a respectful tone with each other. Really appreciate that. But you guys are talking over each other a little bit. Johnny, I know you're having a rough connection, so it's probably harder for you. But please make sure to let Jill finish his statement before his sentence before you respond. And I know your connection's rough, so it probably sounds like he's stopped and then you're starting. Yeah. But when on our end, it sounds like a little bit of you're kind of cutting him off, and give Jill a fair chance. No, you're all right. I think you guys are being very respectful. You're having a friendly disagreement, or at least a polite disagreement. And that's exactly what I want to encourage here. So I appreciate that you guys are both making your strongest case and you're being very respectful to each other. No ad hominem, none of that stuff. So please feel free to continue. And then I do want to make sure that everybody else gets a chance to get involved as well. I wanted you guys to have a chance to get into it. Because I think Chris has some questions maybe about this. Do you mind if we work around the room, you guys, or do you want to continue?
Yeah, I was going to let Chris go next because he wanted to say something. So Chris,
I just want to say something because it sounds like you guys are kind of caught in a this. So maybe we can reframe it by saying, this is what I'll say. We need to define what we call evidence. I kind of said it in the room. If we want to go textual, if the text says it, then we talk about the text, then we have to keep it in the text. If you want to now all of a sudden talk about scholars and their interpretations, then you're really opening up the floodgates to anybody who has some knowledge bringing their interpretation. So I think we really need to kind of like narrow the field to determine what we can count on and what is like heretical or apologetic nonsense, right? So maybe that can frame the conversation a little bit more, like what's an authority when we're talking about the Bible. That's all. Go ahead, as you were.
So it's interesting because there are some scholars that will propose that this is actually Mary's genealogy. There are also a lot of other scholars that won't, and the reason being is because the text doesn't ever say that. It's just something people have come up with to try to reconcile a problem. So specifically, the authors of Matthew and Luke, like they're not using the exact same theologies. They're not using the exact same sources. So they don't know exactly the genealogy. I don't know what would their source even be for these genealogies, right? So that's the reason why they're different. It's just because one of them, they're both for Joseph. They tell you in the text. It's Matthew 1 says it's through Joseph, and then it also includes that Mary was his wife, and that Mary was the one that gave birth to Jesus. So in Matthew 1, it tells you that this is Joseph, but his wife Mary is the one that bore Jesus, who is called the Messiah. And Luke 3 is also going through Joseph. It tells you, it says Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, as was thought, Joseph, son of Heli. I see nothing in the text at all that would ever lead me to believe that this is about Mary. And earlier in Luke, we're told that Mary is indeed possibly a Levite because she's related to Elizabeth, who was a daughter of Aaron, not an actual daughter of Aaron, but you know what I mean. Like she was in that lineage. So I see nothing in the text that would lead me to believe that this is about Mary. It's just a Christian apologetic that they've come up with to try and reconcile a problem instead of being honest and just saying, yeah, this is a contradiction.
Yeah, well, like I said, there are several ways of looking at this, alternative views. So if we just want to cling to one, when we already admit that even Eusebius had his own understanding, which I think is quite silly. But now that you've explained that to me, but Africanus was another person who was very early. So this isn't just some Christian interpretation. This is what people have been saying from the very beginning of Christianity, basically, at least the second or third century. So I hold to the Levite view that Mary is basically, or both genealogies are for Joseph, but they follow a different they follow different paths. So one's legal, one is biological within his own family.
Also, I just fact checked you, and it seems you're wrong. There was indeed a way to say that there was a son-in-law. There was a way to do that in Koine Greek, so that doesn't really hold up.
Oh, okay. Well, some scholars disagree with that.
But I'll
So
say
there's
this, again, I'm trying to be helpful here. If you can just say a scholar said it, okay, cool. My grandpa says stuff. My question is, from where do you draw the authority? Like if I talk about chemistry, I have to show my work. If you're talking about the Bible and you're talking about the interpretation of the Bible, you still have to show your work. Vibes isn't enough to get you through the day. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is what you're talking about, Brandon, Chris. You're talking about it's a fallacy called an appeal to authority.
Right.
I agree. So we both are appealing to an authority. It's just, and in these cases, when the Bible is not clear,
right,
then it is open for interpretation. So we call these issues, like say if we were both Christians and we had this disagreement, this wouldn't be something. This would be considered a secondary issue or non-essential. This wouldn't be something that would divide us as Christians.
Right. This isn't like soteriology or something like that. Absolutely. But I think that
no, it has nothing to do with soteriology. Right, it's the fact that the Bible is not explicit here. So you can have more than one interpretation and still not fall outside of the pale of orthodoxy.
I would say,
but what I'm seeing here is that you're mentioning scholars and Johnny is hammering down on the text itself. So Johnny is at the source. You can't go any deeper than the source itself. You're reading outside the source and citing scholars, but
I'm not reading outside the source. If I were to say that scholars have determined that to sail a compass is to sail in a circular course. You can't get upset with me and say I'm going outside of the text. I mean, that is what the text says. It's just not saying it in a way that we would expect it to be said. It's not rendering the text in a word for word literal fashion.
Yeah, so they have.
And that we would be able to understand it. It's a
right. You know, that's
dealing
true with that example, but that's an appeal to analogy, and that's another fallacy, because the story you're talking about, sail to a compass, is an example of a ideology. What is it? Idiom.
That's what we're arguing here.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what scholars are arguing here.
But you have to establish that this is in fact an idiom, and an idiom doesn't actually make sense given the text itself. When the text gives you a clear, direct context of what it's talking about, the context is clear. It's talking about the lineage of Jesus, giving names, specifically names, in a specific order. So there's no euphemisms here. So there's no idioms here. You're reading that into the text to try and harmonize it.
There would be a use of it if my scholars are correct that say that there was no such word.
There was Gambros.
Linguistic. Well, the
Gambros refers to a son-in-law, and it's used in the Septuagint. Yeah, Genesis 12:19 or 19:12. I forget. Let me find out which one it was again. Yeah, Genesis 19:12. It refers to a brother-in-law. I'm sorry, a son-in-law. It can actually be used for both.
You gotta talk closer to your mic, Johnny.
We're losing you, Johnny.
So Genesis 19:12, it uses the word gambros in the Septuagint, referring to a son-in-law, and the word can also be used for a brother-in-law, can be used for both. And so they had a way to say that there was a brother-in-law of, a son-in-law, a son-in-law to Heli. They had a way to say that. They didn't, because there's nothing in the text that would lead us to believe that. So the text specifically tells us who this genealogy is going through. It's going through Joseph, through Joseph's lineage. Well, and if you listen to what the early church figures tell us, if you look at what Papias says, he already has a way to fix this problem of there being two different dads. His idea how to fix it is just, well, Joseph had two fathers. He had a biological father and a stepfather.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
One view. That's one view. That's one of many views, like I said. But the Septuagint is a later addition or later redaction. So I mean, we would expect that word to be there. They're arguing that their word didn't exist then.
Well, the Septuagint dates back to the 2nd century before the Common Era, because the Septuagint started with the I believe it was the Ptolemies, and this is because it was ordered the Torah. The first 5 books is what the Septuagint started as. So Genesis would have been the first Greek translate, would have been within the content of the first Greek translations. So that came well before the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Matthew. This is 70 of the Common Era and later. Yeah, you're talking about over 300 years later, but before you start getting to the New Testament and then the Greek translation from there.
Yeah, so we know that they had a way to say son-in-law. They had a way to say it. They just didn't say it because that's not what the text is about. You have to add that into the text, Rebuke. Sorry, Jill.
Again, many scholars disagree.
These scholars are telling you that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah, I am lagging a little bit. I think my phone is because my phone's hot. I think, but I'm sure there are scholars that make this apologetic. There's also scholars that will give all the kind of craziest apologetics there are, just absurd ones that lie about what the language is about. Like the scholars that are telling you that there was no way to say a son-in-law are just telling you something that's not true. Because
that's one interpretation. There are many. We don't have to cling to one to be considered orthodox, or because
how do you decide? So how do you decide? Like, what's your metric?
Well, first and foremost, why do we have to trace the lineage through Mary anyway?
Because that's what they've done it.
What?
Sorry,
even the Bible does that. Yes, the Bible does that to prove a point.
But it
because Jesus did not have an earthly father, so he is the legal heir.
But it doesn't say that in the text.
So that's why it's traced through his adopted father. So, but why do we need this? Because this is an entire nothing burger to begin with, which is why it's not an essential, by the way.
No, it's not, because the Messiah has to come from the line of David through Solomon. So if this genealogy is going through Joseph, but obviously Joseph isn't really the father of Jesus. That means Jesus isn't actually
He is
related,
the father. He's a legal father. He's a legal
but he's
father.
not his biological father.
Doesn't
The
have to be
problem
the
is that
biological
it
father.
does. The Old Testament
Who
tells you
says?
time and time again that it's of the seed
Nope.
of David.
Nope.
Oh, so you haven't read it.
Who says that? Where does the Bible say that? He has to be
Objective
the
of the verse.
biological seed of David.
So what do you think the word seed means?
So it has to come through the line of the father.
Yeah, through the biological father, correct?
The seed, yeah.
So again, many of your interpretations, your
Not interpretation,
apologetics,
but the text says.
many people disagree with them.
But wait a
I'm
minute,
sure.
That's all
I'm
I'm saying. You're
I'm
saying
sure-
it has to be this, it has to be this way, it has to be that way.
Yeah, 'cause I've
Some
read the
Jewish
book.
scholars disagree.
Because I've
But
read
Joe,
the book.
I want to make a point here. When I said, oh, so adoption counts, you were the one who said we don't need adoption. It's through Mary. So now we're talking about Mary. You're like, why are we talking about Mary?
We don't really need both either. We don't really need both, or one or the other. We need one. I don't, but we don't
You're not
need
beating
both.
the allegations, Jill. I hate to say it,
Yeah,
but it
he's
sounds
really-
like you're just picking and choosing
Yeah.
based on.
I'm saying there are different interpretations. You guys are clinging to one of 8
we're not clinging to
interpretations and
any.
thinking
suggest
We're
what the
asking,
text-
what's your
that's
metric?
the reading. That's the proper reading. That's really not.
So in a
not
sentence, say this is the metric for how I determine what scholar is credible. Because scholars say things all the time. There's crazy scholars, there's biblical scholars, there's Jewish scholars, there's scholars are as far as the eye can see. How do you determine what scholar is credible and what scholar isn't? Who do you dismiss and who do you embrace? What is your metric?
Well, I don't really consider there to have to be a metric for secondary issues because the Bible is a final court of arbitration.
Okay.
But where the Bible does not care to be specific, or when it's something like this, where there is terminology where scholars disagree, then we really don't fight over it. It really doesn't matter what interpretation you hold to.
So
It
it
doesn't.
vibes?
But traditional Jewish scholars maintain that it must be biological descendant.
Because that's what the text says.
Through the father's line.
Because that's what the text says. The text uses the term seed, the specific Hebrew word, which I could find it for you if you want, and I forgot exactly the exact word, but the word.
I've got it right in front of me. Actually, I read it, and I'm going to put it up on the screen for everybody. I read it at the beginning of this whole thing. It comes from 2 Samuel chapter 7. It's verse.
We understand that.
Verse 12. When your days. Well, here, let me bring it up on the screen so that it's fair to everybody here. Jeremiah. I'm in 2 Samuel here. Where did I have that? 2 Samuel. Yeah, share this.
Do you understand that when you remove presupposition, so many of your arguments have to now fend for themselves and they can't? You need that presupposition to give the credibility to any of this stuff. You need that presupposition. Do you realize that?
Everybody has presuppositions, sure.
Yeah, but when we have to defend those presuppositions, for the most part, we're judged by whether or not we're able to do that. Where you feel like you shouldn't have to do that.
No, I feel like it doesn't really. Well, you're presupposing that your scholar is correct when he says that there is.
I'm not citing a scholar here.
Well, okay, well, you presuppose he looked up an information about whatever it was, AI, or he presupposes that AI is correct.
Hold on. I did not use AI. I looked up what the word meant. I didn't go to the AI. I looked at a website, a Greek website, Koine Greek website. Specifically, the word actually looked at two. Specifically, one then and one just now. Specifically, the word can refer. Hold on, let me see what it is again. I forget what it's called. Gambros. The word is used to refer to sons-in-law, and they had this word in the New Testament. It's like it's not like it was a new word. Like it's not like it's a word that's new and like, oh, they didn't have it then. No. This is in the Septuagint, meaning this word even predates the New Testament. So they had a word that they could use to refer to someone's son-in-law, and even their brother-in-law. The word is used for brother-in-law too. It's used for both. So they had a word that they could use to tell you that, oh yeah, this is just Mary's genealogy, but it's just going through Joseph because it's the legal line, right? They had a way to tell you that using this word. They didn't, because that's not what the text is about. The text is telling you that this is another genealogy. It's going through Joseph, his family. And like the apologetic that Eusebius uses is just, well, Joseph had two fathers. Now, whether that's the case or not, like, I don't know, but that's the apologetic he uses. But like, there's nothing in the text that would ever lead us to believe that this is about Mary. And specifically, the Messiah has to come from the seed of David, the biological seed of
And
David.
here's the verse for that. I've got it right here. So it's verse 12, and this is the updated edition. So it says,
when your days are fulfilled and you lie down. Oh, where'd it go?
Here we go.
When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come forth from your body, and I will establish his kingdom.
And that is interpreted as the seed in almost every older translation. This is, like I said, this is the update, the current edition. So they say forth from your body meaning from your seed, from your loins. It's a literally your own DNA is supposed to produce the Messiah.
Yeah.
Forth from your body.
The problem is that Jesus doesn't. If you believe that Jesus is born of a virgin, then he's not from Joseph. That's why there are Christians out there who reject the idea that Mary was actually a virgin. They'll just say, well, that part was wrong. And the reason for saying this is because, well, the Messiah has to come from the seed of David. So therefore, Joseph has to actually be his father, as well as God being his father. It has to be both. If that's, it has to be both, because they can't. They know that this problem exists, and they just try to reconcile it by saying, well, Mary wasn't really a virgin. That's just something about that means something else. It's trying to say that she's like a virgin, as in she's sinless or something. I've had people tell me that before. But there's nothing in the text of Luke 3 that would ever lead us to believe that this is a genealogy of Mary. It's just not in there. You have to appeal to scholars who are obviously not telling you the truth. If they're telling you that you told me they told you that they say that, sorry, that you said that they're.
Well, that's one theory that I don't necessarily have to cling to. Again, I can give you several theories. You can critique each one, but I can critique yours as well, and I don't have to necessarily say yours is the actual reading. So what I don't appreciate is when you suggest that your reading, your presupposition is the actual reading of the text, and then ours, therefore, by default, are apologetics.
And I don't appreciate you interrupting me, Jill. I was in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just asking me a question, and I was just responding.
No. So you told me that the scholars you're citing have said that there is no Greek way, there is no Koine Greek word to say son-in-law. That's not true. I just looked it up. I looked at two different websites, one then, and I just looked at one a minute ago. There is definitely a way to say it. Gambros can refer to a son or a brother-in-law. It can be both. The word can mean both. So they had a way to say this.
And there's an argument as to whether or not that word actually was used.
And it wasn't Tau. No, any scholar who tells you that is just wrong, because you can read the text. It says Joseph Tau Heli, Joseph of Heli. The word Gambros does not show up in Luke 3.
Okay. Well, that's just one interpretation. That's a view that it's also the Levite view that I hear. Yes. Yeah.
Interpretation. The text tells you what you can read the text. The text says Joseph Tau Heli, Joseph of Heli.
Okay.
So there's nothing.
There is other. I hold to two interpretations, and that's not one of them.
What's your other one?
There's the Levirate view, as I mentioned, which says that these are both lines of Joseph. One is just showed through the legal, and then the other through the or the adoption, and the other is through the physical line. So the authors did this on purpose, by the way. So they really didn't care what the Old Testament suggested, if you've noticed. Even Jesus, when he comes on the scene, he says, "But I say," this is said of old, but I say.
Oh, that's not true.
So the gospel writers intentionally did this with the Old Testament, even though you would argue that the Old Testament prophecies do not fit Jesus. And this is overall, generally speaking, when it comes to messianic prophecies. Like, for instance, the virgin birth, you would argue it doesn't fit. But Matthew, anyway, he of course would have read the Old Testament. He still suggested that they are speaking about Jesus. So Matthew's genealogy is establishing Jesus's legal right to the throne of David through his adoptive father Joseph. So in this view, this is from the text. He's naming and raising Jesus and therefore Joseph legally incorporates him into the house of David. Okay?
Jill, it's like you
That's
didn't listen to anything we
Matthew's.
said.
No, that's Matthew's apologetic.
But it's like
you
you didn't listen to anything we said, though. So specifically,
I listened to what
hold
you
on,
said.
Jill, don't interrupt me, please.
Okay.
So specifically, we're telling you that the Old Testament tells you that the Messiah has to come from the seed of David. So I would not care what some random author who isn't Matthew, by the way, we have no evidence that Matthew wrote Matthew, and there's actually things against it. But we have no reason. Number one, we have no reason to think that Matthew wrote Matthew. But the fact that he's butchering what the Old Testament says to fit his theological need is exactly the problem, because he's not getting it right. So you brought up the virgin birth. I'm glad, because I love this prophecy. So first, Jill, what is the context of Isaiah 7? Do you know?
I want to establish something.
Jill, can you just answer my question?
I can answer you, but let me answer you this way. I want to establish. You just ignored everything I just said. Now,
no,
I know what you're back before we move on to something else. I want to get some closure on this idea that there's a problem here, because you cried and complained about Christians coming later with interpretations, but all they were doing was trying to interpret Matthew, whose interpretation is what the Bible teaches.
It's not.
Okay? So we don't really care what any Jewish scholar says. Let me just set this out straight. I don't care if he's Rabbi Singer. I don't care who he is. We don't care what any 21st century Jewish scholar says about messianic prophecy, because Matthew was a Jew living in the first century. Now, you can try to poison the well and tell us, everyone, how Matthew is not trustworthy, but the New Testament writings are the most trustworthy as far as authenticity is concerned, as far as historicity is concerned. They're the most trustworthy text that we have on Jesus Christ, life, teachings, and theology, or whatever you want to call it. Okay.
So now hold on. Johnny, don't interrupt Jill. And sorry, Jill, were you still going? I wanted to just.
No, I'm done.
Okay, no, I think that puts us at an impasse, respectfully, because I think that if Jill is going to say that we don't care, then ultimately it doesn't matter what you say to him about this at this point forward. So I think
we can debate Matthew's interpretation.
Oh, fantastic!
Versus scholars that came later, or Jewish scholars then disagree with Matthew. I'm sure they did.
I won't use scholars.
Of course, the Jews. Okay, well, here's what we have. We have the Jews from the first century who disagreed with Jesus when Jesus came. His first sermon, he picks up. Get this, guys. Picture this. Jesus comes out of nowhere from Nazareth, which is not a town where anyone should ever be coming, where any king should ever come from. So they rejected him for that reason alone. He walks in, he grabs the Isaiah scroll, and he reads it, and he says, "This day, this is being fulfilled through me." You can imagine the jaw is just dropping and hitting the ground. Like, who does this guy think he is? So yes, Jesus does this. He does this with all the Old Testament, and the Jews rejected him for that, because they, like you today, did not believe he fit the prophecies. Okay, I just want to set that straight.
It's because he didn't. So I'll explain this.
Hold on. Before you get into it, Johnny, hold on, because we're moving the goalpost to a completely different topic. I understand Jill brought it up, and it wasn't a goalpost shift on Jill's part. He was just using another analogy, a reference. So I don't think that he was being fallacious with talking about the virgin birth. I don't think that was. But it is now at this point moving the goalpost to a different conversation. And I want to give Robin a chance to introduce herself, talk about the amazing stream she had last night, clear the air with her and Jill, because I did mention Robin and Jill both in the thing. So I want to make sure that we have open dialogue here for all that. And then Dark Light hasn't been able to speak in a long time. And Chris had an interesting point that I think was never really addressed that I'd like to highlight. So just to keep everybody involved, because I think you guys are doing a great job with this back and forth. And I really appreciate that you guys are both being respectful. I know it gets a little heated, but I think you guys are doing a great job. But let's let Robin have the floor for a minute. And Robin, you did a great job with your stream. I cannot believe you went. I looked at that 8.5 hours or something like that. That's insane. I don't know how you had the fortitude to do an 8.5 hour stream, for one thing, and participated the whole time. It wasn't like everybody else was just carrying the load for you. You were actively participating in that for 8.5 hours. That is insane.
Oh yeah. When I get going, I stay that way. I was something in motion stays in motion. There you go. No,
Yeah, the Newton's law of motion. Whatever's in motion stays in motion.
and
Whatever rest. Yeah.
yeah. And my participation may not have been all that much value, though. I don't know about that.
I enjoyed it. I thought you guys did a great job. I had to bow out, but I actually watched the stream for several hours after I left. I got dinner with the wife, and then I came back and I had it playing. I left it playing on my laptop while I was gone to help you with your watch hours. And then I played it on my phone when we were driving out to get in the car. And I came back and we've set dinner on the counter. And I left the room for a second. I come back and my wife had the funniest look on her face. And she says, you're making me listen to this in stereo, because it was playing on my laptop in one room and my phone in another room. And it's coming at her from both directions. She was like, I said, oh, sorry.
That is too kind. Too kind. It sounds like y'all are having a pretty good discussion.
Yeah, they're going back and forth. They're actually doing a very good job with this. Getting into it, we're talking about the line of Jesus. Jill's offering variations of various apologetics that we've heard, or arguments, if I want to say it. And Jill's, I think he framed it as arguments, not apologetics necessarily, views. And Johnny is giving some really good pushback. Johnny's staying within the text, and I think that's the stronger argument. But earlier, just to kind of clear the air, so Jill did say that he did just now found your email. And so he said that he did agree to do the debate on biblical morality. We set it up for May. So I don't know if you have a calendar or something you can write on and take some notes or whatever. I can remind you on Discord. But we're set up for May 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to do it on your channel.
8 Eastern, you said?
8 Eastern, May 16th. Did I say 16th? Is that right? Yeah. And that's a Saturday.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's very good.
You said 13th.
Perfect. And then Jill, I don't know, are you in like Missing Mods Discord by chance?
No, I don't really. I do have Discord, but I only go on there if somebody wants to talk, debate me, or discussion something with me. I really don't go on there often.
So Robin's got I've got a format for the debate, and she can should she email it to you, or do you want me to just go over it real quick with you now, or what do you prefer?
You can email it to me. I don't want to take away from the show.
Okay. Yeah, Robin, you can just email the format that I sent to you. It's the standard format that I've done all my debates in. It's very easy. It's simple, and it keeps the audience engaged because nobody's going on for too long. Mm-hmm. And so if you have any changes you want to make to it, Jill, I'm pretty flexible, but something that's, these debates that go on for like 3-4 hours or whatever, I don't think, that doesn't really keep the audiences engaged. And I also, just with everything I have going on at my house, I can't commit to like a 4-hour freaking, deal. So about 90 minutes plus or minus, if we take audience questions, is about all I can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Objective. May I continue for just a moment?
Are you going to get into the next, into the virgin birth?
Yeah, but I just wanted to say something before I did that.
Okay, yeah, just hold off on the virgin birth part because I do want to work around the room. But if you want to have a rebuttal or whatever real quick, feel free.
Yeah. So I would just say that the reason the Jewish people did not accept Jesus is specifically because he didn't fulfill the prophecies. If he had actually done the things that he was supposed to and actually fulfilled the prophecies, they would have accepted him because they were waiting on a Messiah to come. So they had the texts, which is with the prophecies that tell them who the Messiah is, what the Messiah will do, what lineage is, what line, David is going to come from, all these things. And the fact that he didn't fulfill them is why they didn't accept him. And then we get to the New Testament, and the authors are blatantly misrepresenting what the Hebrew Bible says, because they're not even reading the Hebrew Bible, they're reading the Greek Septuagint. Every time Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John quote the Old Testament, they're quoting the Greek Septuagint. They're not quoting the Hebrew text, they're quoting the Greek. And so, that's the reason. So specifically, right, the Old Testament tells you that the Messiah is going to come from the actual body, the seed of David. And then we have a problem because neither of Jesus' genealogies end in that. And so then there's these wild apologetics that they have to get into to try and fix this problem. It just doesn't work because they have to go outside of the text. So I just want to get this.
That's a fair rebuttal to what Jill had said. So now we'll put a pin in that. And then
Okay.
we're gonna give everybody a chance. Jill, I'm definitely gonna give you time to have a response to that as well, to be fair to everybody. But let's just start working our way around the room. Darklight, you've been really pushed back in the corner, and I do apologize. You're always so patient, and I really commend that. You're setting an example for everybody. So go ahead, and Darklight, do you have any comments on this or any other comments at all? The floor is yours.
I don't really have any input on the subject we're touching on right now. I was pagan for most of my life, and I didn't start reading the Bible until a couple years ago. So I'm not super in depth on it like Johnny is. I think Johnny's doing great. I did have some other stuff on some other subjects I wanted to touch on if we had time. But, you know, while we're on these subjects right here, I was just enjoying listening and being a smartass in the comment section.
How much time do you have to? Do you have time to let these guys work through Isaiah, the virgin birth? I think that's Isaiah chapter 7, if I remember right. Do you have time to let them work through that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Because I definitely want to hear what you have to say. I want to get into some of the other stuff. Chris, Bionic Latino. Sorry. It is Chris also. Yeah. So you go ahead. Yeah. Why don't you take the floor? I think you made a really good observation earlier and had a fair question. And I don't think either person necessarily addressed it. It might have just gone kind of past them because they were focused on each other, which is perfectly understandable. But you asked a valid question, which is ultimately what is the source? What's the consideration for authority? And when it comes to the issue I have when we start talking about biblical scholars, quote unquote, is the significant majority, and I'm talking like I don't have a survey on this, so I'm kind of shooting from the hip here, but I would say it's over 90% of biblical scholars are biblical scholars who signed a statement of faith. I don't know of any real biblical scholars that didn't have to go to an accredited seminary, and there isn't a single accredited seminary in the U.S. or in the world that I'm aware of. I know for sure in the U.S. there isn't one, but I don't know of anyone in the entire world that doesn't have a statement of faith. So what that is that it's a contract or an agreement that you're signing with the college that says you will affirm X, Y, and Z. And there's different types of Bible colleges out there. So you have, like, I attended a dispensationalist college down in Southern California. There's like, you have Baptists, you have Calvinists. I mean, I could go down the list of the Trinitarian, Unitarian, blah, 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 blah. So depending on whatever the seminary is espousing, that's what you're affirming that you will affirm, that you will agree to. And they make you sign this with your entrance, okay, with your entrance fees. So they don't do this after they give you the information and say, okay, now we want you to sign the statement of faith. No, it's before you ever get the information. You're going to agree to the divinity of Jesus or the Trinity or whatever it might be. And this is an incredibly disingenuous process. The reason I trust science over biblical scholars is because they don't tell evolutionary biologists you have to affirm evolutionary biology before we teach you about evolutionary biology, and you can make your own decisions after that. But no, before we give you the information, we're going to make you sign something that says you'll affirm that. They don't do that in science. They don't do that in any scientific field or any other field other than in biblical scholarship. So I don't think biblical scholars are a reliable source because of the obvious bias. That's the issue with that. However, there is a fair criticism to say, well, some critical scholars may have their own biases, because we know that every single person is going to have biases at some point. So your question about what are we crediting as an authority, I think is a really fair question. So I think, and I just want to highlight what you said about that, because I think it got kind of missed. Neither person really said, hey, this is why I think this is an authority, or this is what we should use as an authority, and justified that position, and then moved into what the authority actually states or shows. So what do you think about all that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, there are, if you've studied the history of human history, whatever, like, there are literary critics who've looked at the Bible. There are sociologists who have looked at the Bible. There are philosophers who have looked at the Bible. They're all taking it at it from a different angle. But when you call yourself a biblical scholar, for me, my question is, well, what offers you that scholarship? Being really well versed in the Bible, being able to kind of cite chapter and verse, or even to understand the history. I mean, let me rephrase that. Understanding the history of the Bible does not give you any credibility to talk about the validity of the Bible. I know there's people who can recite Tolkien off the top of their head, but that doesn't mean that they're saying that the Lord of the Rings really, really happened. So I think we really need to be clear if you're going to say this biblical scholar has this opinion, what are they basing that opinion on? Are they basically saying this is what's in alignment with the sociological culture of the time? Or are they saying that because of this kind of contorted and twisted interpretation of it, they are now kind of confirming a pre-existing presupposition that's biased? And that's my point. If you're going to tell me this biblical scholar said X, Y, and Z, my initial question is, well, why should I care that they said that? I'm sure there's another biblical scholar that said something the opposite, looked at the same verse, looked at the same passage, looked at the same language, but for them, they turn young lady into virgin, or they turn young woman into virgin. Or this person said it was a tree, this person says it was a cross, this person says it's the blood of the lamb, this person says that, you know what I mean? Anybody, opinions are like assholes, as they say, right? So my question is, why do I care what, some guy in a room, what some friar came out and said, well, according to my reading of the Bible, this is what I think the Bible means. Especially, and by the way, I'm going to make this as a sidebar, especially when it's supposed to be divinely inspired, and it's especially supposed to be, God's hand, passed through their quills. That unfortunately puts you, as soon as you start talking about, that this is the inspired word of God, you do not have the same leeway that you would have if we were talking about, Lord of the Rings. So if you're going to call it biblically and divinely inspired, your margin of error is almost zero. Otherwise, all of a sudden, it just becomes, well, my version of God fits this narrative. And that's the argument I've kind of been making this whole time, and why I'm not really getting into the nitty gritty of what the Greeks said and what the Romans said and what the Corinthians said and whatever, or how they interpreted these words. Because for me, is once you start talking interpretation, that whole kind of divinely inspired shit goes out the window. Pardon my French.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and very well articulated as always, Chris. You're very well spoken. And I think that you're highlighting something that's really important there, that if it is divinely inspired, the only pushback I would give is modest. I would say it's not the margin of error isn't near zero. It should be zero, literally. Yeah. I mean, if it is supposedly divinely inspired, but I think that was very well said.
Well, what is the error? The error is, if I'm listening and hearing you, the error is that there are certain things, as I've already stated, that the Bible doesn't care to be explicit on. So therefore, there can be more than one rendering or understanding. So if the Bible doesn't intend to be clear, then it is no error or mistake on the Bible's part.
I disagree.
So what I would argue then is that no Christian, and I gave an example of two Christians arguing with each other, can say, okay, you're wrong, you're no longer a Christian because the Bible is not explicit. And I would also argue, and that would be dishonest, and that wouldn't be fair. And I would also argue that if a skeptic were to take one interpretation, which seems like what's going on here, and say, you're wrong, or the Bible is wrong, that would also be an error as well. Let me give you a quick example, and I'll be brief. Regarding the age of the earth. So there are two major interpretations. I say three, and I even hold to the third interpretation, which is not as popular as the two that we often hear about, old earth versus young earth. So what a skeptic would do is they would cling to the young earth interpretation and say that's what the Bible says plainly, clearly, and therefore the Bible is false. Okay, so I would argue that this is not something the Bible is trying to be, even gives us an answer to. The Bible doesn't give us the answer to the age of the earth. Okay, so just because you are clinging to the interpretation that is the most popular throughout Christendom doesn't mean that you've debunked the Bible. Okay, and that's what I would argue here.
Can I ask, if you don't mind, Jill, just so for the audience and for clarity, you mentioned there are three different interpretations. Do you mind laying them out as quickly and concisely as you can? There's two you said that are popular, and a third that you kind of hold as your own. What are those three versions specifically, if you don't mind?
Well, the two, old earth versus young earth. Everyone's familiar with those two. The third one, which most are not familiar with, is called the literary framework view. And this view holds that Moses never intended to give you the age of the earth, or that the account is not It's not it's not designed to give you a chronology of creation.
So it's just ambiguous on that particular point, essentially.
Well, it's arranged symmetrically. It's arranged in a way, in a fashion. It's a mnemonic. It's a literary device. It's like please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. It's designed to teach you something about God, that He created all things. It's not designed to teach you which came first, the second, third, fourth, or some sort of order of creation.
Okay, and I don't want to go down a completely different random rabbit hole, but I think that that's a whole conversation to unpack, because I think there's a reason that they come with the young Earth model is where that's derived from. But again, I don't want to completely derail. We've already put a pin in that virgin birth narrative. So I think you guys are doing such a great job with your back and forth. So I'm going to pull the pin out and kind of let you guys. I think.
Hell yeah.
I think it was Johnny's turn to respond, or am I?
Yeah.
But I just want to say something super quick. I noticed that you mentioned skeptic, right? I would make the argument that no matter what you believe, you should start out as a skeptic and let the evidence get you to where you need to be, and not start out believing and then find your way to kind of squirrel your way back. So I take skeptic as not a compliment, but I think that's what all adults with critical thinking skills should already start with: skepticism, and let the evidence do the work. That's what I would say.
Yeah, we all start out as skeptics, including myself. So yeah.
Okay. Well,
so
show me the work. That's what I'm saying. Show me the work that got you to where you need to be. Show me the work.
Well, that's what I'm showing you here. Well, in the case with
you've already been wrong.
These, so-called contradictions, it's just a matter of, how you look at the text or how you view the text.
Yeah, in order to reconcile contradictions, you just have to ignore the text. So, anyways, in Matthew 1, the author makes a claim that Jesus is born of a virgin. You're familiar with this, right, Jill?
Yes.
Okay. No. That prophecy is Isaiah 7, correct? Is that what he's quoting?
Which Matthew would have read.
Mm-hmm. So, no, this isn't. The author of Matthew isn't Matthew, and the author of Matthew is reading the Septuagint. But we'll get there in a minute. So
that's your assumption. That's your assumption.
I'll demonstrate it in a second. So the context of Isaiah 7 is that there are two kings, Rezin and Pekah. One of these kings is from Syria. The other is from northern Israel. These two kings have formed an alliance. Syria and Ephraim have formed an alliance. These two kings are attacking King Ahaz, the king of Judah. They want to remove him from the throne. So at the beginning of the chapter, they try to besiege Jerusalem, but they fail. So they fail in actually conquering it. They attack it, but they don't conquer it. They fail. So because of this, Ahaz and his people are afraid. And the book specifically says that Ahaz and his people's hearts shook because the trees of the forest shake before the wind. They were afraid that this was happening. So because of this, God sends the prophet Isaiah to Ahaz to reassure his faith. And this reassurement of faith comes in the form of prophecies that are about the destruction of the kings. So one of the prophecies is in 7:14. It says, "Behold," it says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel." It tells you that before this child is old enough to know right from wrong, the two kings will be defeated by the king of Assyria. That's the context of the prophecy. And it doesn't say there's a virgin, and it doesn't say she will conceive. It says, "Hine cha'amachara," which means, behold, the young woman is with child. And it doesn't say she's going to become pregnant. It says she's already pregnant. Torah is an adjective which means to be pregnant. The reason the author of Matthew made this mistake is because he's reading the Greek Septuagint, where he uses the word parthenos. Now, the word parthenos is something, because the word parthenos can mean either a virgin or a young woman. But during the author of Matthew's time period, when Matthew was written about, the context of the word, the semantic range of the word would have narrowed just a little bit to meaning more virgin. So he just read the text and misunderstood exactly what it was talking about. But when you read Isaiah 7, you don't see anything about a virgin birth in there. And the language it uses just tells you that this is a young woman, and it tells you that she's already pregnant. And this is a prophecy about something happening 730 years before Jesus. This is an immediate prophecy to King Ahaz about the Assyrian invasion.
Okay. And Matthew would have known this, right?
If he had read the whole text, yeah, he would.
Okay. So Matthew, living in the first century, would have known everything you just said. So and he still says that Jesus is the fulfillment of this prophecy. Why do you think he did that?
Because he made a mistake. He misunderstood what the word parthenos is. There is no way.
That's your assertion.
listen, Jill, there is no way that anyone could read Isaiah 7, especially in the Hebrew. This is why I don't. This is why he was reading the Septuagint, is because there's no way you could read the Hebrew text and come away with the assertion that this is about a virgin giving birth. But in the Greek text, you could make that mistake.
So what the argument is what's clear, what's obvious is that Matthew intentionally did this. He read Isaiah 7. He knew that Isaiah's wife already had a child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he already knew that. So that's not something that had the issue was an issue of interpretation.
So he lied.
Didn't understand. Hold on, relax. It wasn't a matter of. This is just using common sense to render the text. So understand what's going on. Okay. So it's therefore more than likely, I'll say, not a matter of him misinterpreting the words. Okay. Because he could read the story and tell and see, right? I could read a Spanish story and I don't necessarily have to know all the words, but I could see in the story someone is getting married or having children. There's a baby that comes up. So I could see. So Matthew is not illiterate. He could read and see that the son was already born, and then he could, or she was already pregnant, or she already had a child, and then he could read in the next chapter that the child was born. The child that was actually prophesied about, right?
Yeah, that's why he made a mistake.
Okay. All right. So he read.
I wasn't done responding.
Okay. All right. I was trying to walk you through
I'm
it.
trying
Go
to say
ahead.
that either he only read the specific he only either read a specific part of this chapter. The author of Matthew, whoever they are, they either only read a specific part of the chapter, the one that they thought aligned with Jesus, because they misunderstood the word Parthenos. Or they did indeed read both chapters and they're just lying, because when you go into the text, there's nothing about Jesus. So what I'm asking for, Jill, is I'm asking you for what would make me think that Isaiah 7 is actually about Jesus.
Again, if you let me walk you through the interpretation Matthew is giving, because you disagree with his interpretation, that's fine, but at least hear the interpretation, because obviously you're not familiar with it. You're when I asked you why he did that, you said, well, he did it because he was ignorant, or he did it because he was lying. He purposely tried to do this to manipulate the text and make Jesus the Messiah. So you have theories, I understand, but that's not at least the theory that we have for why Matthew did what he did.
Okay? Sure. You think there's a midrashic interpretation.
And I believe this is the most natural, rational interpretation as to why Matthew, after reading, you're going to assume, he only read one chapter. No, they read entire books back then. They didn't just read one chapter like we do today, or they get the Reader's Digest. Okay, so I'm not going to assume an absurdity like, well, he only read up to the part where she had the first child, and he didn't read about the baby actually being born in the next chapter, the very next chapter. Come on, I mean, you stretch credulity. So we're going to assume so that we don't stretch credulity, that he read all of Isaiah. Okay, he understood she was not a literal version. He understood the baby was literally born in the very next chapter. Can we both agree or make that? Is that a safe assumption we both can say?
I would say that if you want to go down this route, then the thing I would ask is, why would I accept a midrashic interpretation? Because at that point, you're admitting that he didn't fulfill it in context.
I'm showing you that the pattern of the fulfillment of prophecy is called typology, is the key to understanding messianic prophecy. What you're not understanding is that Matthew is the one that is interpreting. You are interpreting Matthew. Okay, Matthew was the first one to say, I'm going to read this in the Old Testament. This is what I'm trying to walk you through step by step. Please just allow me to do this.
Sure,
Matthew is the one that is writing. Okay,
I could agree with you that Matthew read it. Sure, I could agree with that. Why it wouldn't change it?
And he's the one doing the interpreting first. Okay, so let's forget about all the other interpretations that come later from Christians. He looked and he read. Now you're coming up with all these things, poisoning the well. He only read one chapter, or he only read part of it. Why can't we just assume? Why do we have to automatically assume legendary corruption? Let's prove legendary corruption, not make conspiracy theories about
Sure, I
corruption.
can prove it. Sure.
Okay.
If you
So
read
let's
Isaiah
prove
7,
it. All right.
sure,
So
Isaiah 7 says nothing about a virgin, and it's
okay,
about
he
something
knew
already
that.
happened.
Okay, we're past that.
Then he's wrong.
Matthew
Then
knew
there
it.
you go.
You know it. I know it. Matthew knew it. You know it. I know it.
The
So
author.
let's move past that. Okay. It's not talking about a virgin. She was not a virgin. She already had a child. Matthew would have known that. We know that today. Let's move past that. Okay. Now, considering that fact, he read it just like you read it, and you understood. No, she wasn't a virgin, and she actually had the child. The prophecy came true in the very next chapter. Do we both agree?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that being the case, Matthew still says this was to fulfill the prophecy. Jesus's birth was to fulfill that prophecy. We would argue that Matthew here is speaking not of predictive prophecy, or what's called direct prophecy or predictive prophecy, like Micah 5:2, but it's a typological prophecy. It views the relationship of the Old Testament to those in the New Testament not as a one-to-one correspondence, where the old is repeated or continued, virgin here, virgin there, etc. But rather that in the terms of two principles. There's a historical correspondence, and then there's a spiritual escalation in the for future. So Matthew is doing this. Christians are not doing this. So please don't accuse Christians of doing this. We believe this is what Matthew is doing. So
both Christian and Matthew do it. Both of them do.
Well,
Johnny, let him finish. Johnny, let him finish the
Matthew
sentence.
Because
Sorry,
Matthew
Jill,
does it.
Make sure you guys, Johnny, I know you're having a rough connection, but make sure you let Jill complete his sentences before you respond. I know your connection is rough, so just be patient because Jill needs to have fair time.
Okay. So we're saying that because Matthew does it, we do it, or we say this is what the text is rendering. We're not making this up. That's all.
So, Jill, my question then would be, the original text doesn't say anything about this, and I wouldn't accept typology. Typology is what they do when they're just trying to apply a past prophecy to their future, but we could do that today. I could make certain parts of Psalm 22 about me. There's a verse in Psalm 22 that says people sneer at me, they mock me. Well, Christians do that all the time to me, so I could make that about me. That's why I don't accept typology, because typology relies on taking a text and then just reinterpreting what it says. What about what the author's intent was? What about the context of the prophecy? So you've already agreed that you've already agreed that the context of Isaiah 7 is about the two kings and then a young woman giving birth to a child who is a sign of the Assyrian invasion. So then the only way you could ever make this about Jesus is just by taking the text, cutting away the context, changing one of the words in there, and then making it about somebody else. Why would I accept that?
That's what Matthew did.
So why would I care what Matthew did?
Well, look, that this is what Matthew, who we believe was led by the Spirit of God, inspired by the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth. I often explain it to my Jewish brothers and sisters like this.
Oh, I'm sure.
If God would have come out directly with the Messiah, even there's a passage in the New Testament that says if they had known Jesus, who Jesus really was, they wouldn't have crucified him. So the Bible, we believe, is concealing Jesus's identity in a way in which you could only actually fully know after the fact. So after Jesus's resurrection, then the scales fall off and the disciples look back and say, aha. But but you're right. Typology, if you don't want to call typology prophecy, fine. Then only deal with trying to debunk the direct prophecies like Micah 5:2. Okay?
Well, Isaiah 7 is a direct prophecy. It's about something that's happening during the days of King Ahaz. The author of Matthew is just trying to recontextualize it. He either, like I'm saying, he either only read one part of it, or he did read all of it, but then he's just trying to recontextualize it and he's cutting away the context. It's one of those. Doesn't matter to me because the end result is the same. Doesn't matter. Is that he's making stuff up. He's taking a text that has nothing to do with what he's trying to say it is, and he's cutting away the context of the prophecy, and then he's saying, yeah, look, this one verse, this one singular verse, 14, It's about Jesus. Well, what about verses 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19? What about all those, right? Like, what about all those verses? What about the next chapter? Because this is all one part of this is all one prophecy. Like Isaiah 7 and 8 go together. These are two together. One is about the before, the other is about the after. Like one is, okay, there's a young woman, she's pregnant. The other is, okay, now she's giving birth, right? So why would I ever then accept that the author of Matthew's interpretation was correct of trying to recontextualize the text, trying to make it about something that it's not actually about?
Yeah,
I want to
mean,
add,
again, that's your, if you want to have that opinion that typology is not prophecy, I would somewhat agree with that. It's never intended to be prophecy. I'm glad you admitted that a prophecy was fulfilled, a direct prophecy was fulfilled in the very
well,
next chapter 8.
after the fact.
So I'm glad you admit that. So at least we're
After the
one for
fact.
one. But the typology deals with both. It says that, yes, even though it was fulfilled literally, historically, it still was a sign or an omen, if you will, that of what was to come, the ultimate fulfillment was in Jesus. So that's what the argument is. That's what Matthew was arguing from the argument of typology. So if you disagree with that, that's fine. That's your interpretation, but Matthew's obviously is different than yours.
Jill, are you a Mormon?
No.
So you're saying that you don't take the Book of Mormon and then try to recontextualize the New Testament with it, correct?
No, but if one of the Mormon prophets did, and he was led by way of the angel Moroni to do so, then you would have to accept that as a Mormon, and you would, reading it as a skeptic, you would have to also accept that as well. If you're doing an internal critique, if you just are a Jewish person, like a secular Jew, and you're looking from the outside in, and you disagree, we know why you disagree. They disagreed with Jesus when he did the same thing. Like I said, his first sermon, he grabbed the scroll and said it applied to him. They looked at him and said, "You're barely 50 years old. How are you even calling yourself a rabbi?" He says, "Before Abraham, I am." They picked up stones to stone him. So he's taking the Old Testament and he is applying every single jot and tittle to himself. A man that was born in a town that was not supposed to be a town of a king, a man that was barely 50 years old, was not a rabbi, had no record of any great accomplishment or miracle. He later performed miracles during his ministry, but so this is after the pattern. So if you're not reading and understanding that there's a pattern here, then you're just basically picking typology and trying to cherry pick that and say, oh well, this is not fulfillment. Well, it's not intended to be fulfilled in the same way. So you said something earlier that sort of caught me. You said, well, the Christians come later and they try to reinterpret, or they try to change things, or I can't remember the term that you used, but you said that the first century Jews rejected him as Messiah because he didn't fit the prophecies. And I would agree with that. But the Jews that did accept him believed that he did fit them, but not in the way that they were expecting him to fit it. They believed that he fit the prophecies in a different way. So even back then, you had an argument as far as which interpretation is correct, right? Even back then.
So then you're admitting then that Jesus didn't fulfill any prophecies in the context of the prophecies, correct?
No, he did. Micah 5:2 is a direct prophecy, but there are different types of prophecies that are a lot more complex than Micah 5:2. Like this one.
So before we move on to Micah 5:2, I want it to be known that Jesus didn't fulfill Isaiah 7. Isaiah 7 says nothing about a virgin giving birth. The context of Isaiah 7 is about something that's happening 730 years before Jesus. I understand that the author of Matthew was doing the midrashic interpretation, as it's called. I understand that he was trying to take a prophecy and apply it to typology, but that's a cope. It's just a cope for the fact that he didn't actually fulfill anything. It's just to say, well, look, this one verse, this one specific verse, yeah, that's about this guy. Yeah, this one specific verse. Ignore all the context. Don't read that. Just read this one verse. Yeah,
that's what an omen is. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's ridiculous
Typology.
because I wouldn't accept that from Mormons either. So if a Mormon, which they do, Mormons do try to do this, they do indeed try to take prophecies from the from the Old and the New Testament. And they try to claim that it's about them. Then I have no reason to accept that either, just because they're adding on to it. They're taking a text and they're cherry picking verses out of it to just say, yeah, that's about this. Like I could do that too. Like I said, there's a verse in Psalm 22 that could be about me.
Well, they're too late to be writing about anything that happened in the first century. So the New Testament is, again, the most reliable, according to, it's a consensus, according to scholars. If you're going to talk about Jesus, then the New Testament is it. So to mention the Book of Mormon or these other texts that came much later and are trying to speak about these issues is a waste of time.
I'm saying that
when Matthew says the virgin birth of Jesus is fulfilled of Isaiah's prophecy, he is doing that on purpose. He's not stupid. He's not ignorant. And I would not assume legendary corruption. So therefore, common sense renders, we understand this in literature as typology. Typology does not require a one-to-one correspondence, which is what you're trying to make it. In order to debunk it, you're trying to turn Matthew's rendering here, his typology, into a direct prophecy and therefore false. But even in direct prophecy, it doesn't mean that everything that is talked about in the history is going to correspond with its escalation, meaning Jesus doesn't have to have on red sandals because Jonah had on red sandals.
Yeah, so basically you're just admitting that then Isaiah 7 isn't really fulfilled by Jesus. It's just that one guy said it was because he's using this interpretive method to just say, well, look, this one verse is about him. Yeah, okay. So I don't see any reason why I would ever accept that. I don't see any reason why I would ever accept somebody taking a single verse out of an entire prophecy that tells you everything that the prophecy is about to then just say, yeah, this is about this guy. Because there's no mention that, oh, when the Messiah comes, it'll just be typology. You'll just have to typologically interpret the prophecies. The prophecies are in the Old Testament for a reason. God is giving you, according to the narrative, he is giving you information about the Messiah so that when he comes, you will know who he is. This whole concept of, well, Jesus, like, you have to accept this typology. Like, that's not in the Old, that's ridiculous. That's not in the Old Testament. There's nothing in the Old Testament that tells us that when the Messiah comes, you just have to interpret the prophecy typologically. So we'll go to Micah 5:2 because this is an interesting one as well. This is actually a good one. Me and Objective did this one, I think, the time before last time we did Micah 5:2. So in the New Testament, they try to make the claim that this is about the Messiah being born in Bethlehem. It's not. The prophecy is about a clan. It's about the clan of the Ephrathites of Bethlehem. It specifically says, "But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, you who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth from me the one who is to rule in Israel." Well, who are the Ephrathites of Bethlehem? Well, if you read 1 Samuel 7, we know that King David's father was an Ephrathite of Bethlehem. This is specifically about somebody coming from a Davidic lineage. That's what this is about. Well, Jesus doesn't fulfill any of that because if you read both of his genealogies, they fail. One goes through Nathan. Even if you want to make the claim that he could still come through Joseph, wouldn't matter, because one goes through Nathan when the covenant's supposed to go through Solomon, 1 Chronicles 22, 9 through 10. And the other goes through Jeconiah, who was cursed in Jeremiah 22:30, so that none of his descendants could ever rule on the throne or be kings in Israel again. So both of his genealogies fail him. So Micah 5:2 cannot actually apply to him. What's that noise? Maybe that's me.
Do you still hear it?
No, I heard like a typing
on his phone. Probably just trying to do some reference work or look into something. Yeah.
No. That might have been me. I was sending a text. So
somebody was typing on it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll get then.
Jill, did you have a response to what Johnny said?
No, not really. I mean, we brought up the Jewish line again. Again, we don't need Mary's line. We have the legal right, the bloodline. Mary's line is cursed anyway, correct? So I think that's why Matthew, again, this is what the Matthew and the authors are doing in the New Testament. We're not doing this.
How would Mary's line be cursed?
the line of Solomon through King.
Mary doesn't come through David. Mary is theoretically a Levite. She's not coming through David. We have no knowledge of that in the Bible. The Bible doesn't tell us that.
Okay, so even if we don't have him coming through Mary's line, we have the legal right, which is Matthew's genealogy. Okay, so he has a legal right to the throne of David through his adoptive father, Joseph.
Not according to the Old.
Not according to who?
Not according to the Old Testament, where it says the Messiah has to come from the actual body, the seed of David.
Okay, the actual body, the seed of David.
Yeah.
There's also Jewish laws that say that you can come through the legal line.
Not
so
king.
Jesus was not a man, or born of a man, period. So this is the way that's rendered according to Matthew and the Jews in the first century. We don't have his Y chromosome. So you can't go into the Bible and say, oh, contradiction. So again, this falls along the same lines of what I've been arguing seemingly for hours now. The New Testament Jewish men were arguing with people in the first century, Jewish people, that yes, Jesus is the fulfillment, but not in the way in which you expected.
Okay,
now,
so then
I think this is a great argument that they made, and the reason why is because we have elsewhere in Scripture where it says that if they had known who Jesus was, because there's too many direct prophecies, like literal prophecies, which is what you're trying to turn all of the prophecies into. They're not designed to do that.
Show me
says
that
if in 1 Corinthians, if they would have known,
in the Old Testament.
meaning, hold on, let me finish my point.
Go ahead.
If they would have known who Messiah was, because there's so many direct, explicit prophecies, even giving his name and his social security number, they would not have crucified him. But the goal was to crucify him. Okay,
well, where does it say in the Old Testament that the Messiah was supposed to be crucified?
So logically, we would expect, therefore, for the prophecies to be almost omen-like an omen, not explicit. Okay, not telling you word detail for detail what would happen to Jesus when this is fulfilled. It is encrypted, if you will. It's encryptic, if you will. It's hidden. We often hear a term.
Where does it say in the Old Testament, in any of the messianic prophecies, that the Messiah was to be crucified?
Jesus tells us where. I'm going to show. Oh, perfect. This is another example. Thank you. This is another example of a Jewish man. We would call him a scholar, the greatest prophet scholar of them all. Takes a story from the Old Testament that had nothing to do with crucifixion. Crucifixion hadn't been invented yet. And he says, this is a sign of what's going to happen to me. Am I not proving that there's a pattern here? If you would just take the time,
which story?
Instead of trying to cherry pick and find false contradictions, to notice that there is a pattern here. The authors are doing this on purpose. He says that the resurrection of Jonah will be like my resurrection in the days. So like Jonah was in the day for 3 days and 3 nights, will be in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So he takes something that happens in real history to a real person who was swallowed by a whale. I know you don't believe that. And he says, you see what happened to him? You see how he was in the whale for 3 days? So shall I. That was to prophesy me being in the earth for 3 days through my crucifixion.
Jill, you made a claim. You made a claim that there was a prophecy about somebody being crucified. Where's that at?
I just told you Jesus says that his crucifixion is prophesied through the sign. He calls it the sign of Jonah.
Yeah, but where's that about crucifixion?
He dismissed everything I just said. Okay, I'm going to try to repeat this. Did anyone catch what I said?
You didn't catch it. You mentioned possibly you implied martyrdom, but at no point did you mention crucifixion.
So you missed what I said also. Okay, let me try to repeat this again.
Are you trying to say Psalm 22? Is that what you're trying to say?
Who are you asking that to?
because that's the one that Christians typically say is by his crucifixion. I don't think that taking a story about somebody dying in the belly of a whale is somehow about crucifixion.
No,
I
it's about
understand that
his resurrection. Okay, you're right. You're right. It's about
okay,
his resurrection.
I'm sure
Okay,
I
now,
know I understand that the New Testament makes that claim, but why should I believe that? Why should I believe
okay,
that any
you
more than
shouldn't.
the
You
claim that
shouldn't.
Aristeas resurrected?
You shouldn't. I'm just explaining
There you go.
what the mindset of the because you have to be led of the Spirit. That the Bible says that these things are foolish to those who
Prove
are
this.
not led
Prove
by
the
the
Spirit
Spirit.
exists. Rebuke.
But you I'm just giving you answers to what they were. We believe what the author was intended. So you can't come into the text and say this was the author's intended.
I
What
can.
the author's intention was. Some nefarious motive. I would, just for the sake of decorum, just not assume without evidence any nefarious motive, unless there's actual proof for that.
Yeah. So
but,
specifically,
or ignorance or anything like that.
I understand what you're saying. I do understand. I pointed this out before. They're trying to do a midrashic interpretation, typology, midrashic. They're trying to do both of those. They're trying to make the claim that these old prophecies about things in the Old Testament, verses of them, only verses, not the whole thing, only verses of them specifically apply to Jesus. I'm saying that's nonsense, because we could do the same thing with anything. We could take any of these prophecies, no matter what the hell they're about, and we could cut out prophecy. We could cut out segments of them and say, yeah, they're about things that are happening now. People try to do the same thing with Revelation. They try to say that it's happening now, but the only problem with that is that a lot of the prophecies in Revelation, the ones that they claim are happening now, have always been happening. Like the Euphrates River drying up, always been happening. So I understand what they're trying to do. People are trying to, the New Testament authors and people now as well are trying to do this midrashic interpretation or this typological interpretation. I get that. I see no reason why I would accept that, is the thing. Like, why would I accept somebody's later interpretation that removes the context and the author's intent from the Old Testament? Why would I accept somebody's later interpretation that's divorced from the context of the passage? Because at that point, you're saying, well, he didn't actually fulfill it. It's just typological. It just sounds like him when you remove a single verse. But that's even not true, because when you actually read these prophecies and you look at like some of the words they use, like in Isaiah 7:14, doesn't say anything about a virgin, but the author Matthew tried to make it seem like it was, because he's reading the Greek Septuagint. So this is just the thing that I'm not understanding, right? Is I don't see why I would then take a prophecy, cut out the context, and then try to apply it to something later when it's already fulfilled.
But Joe, by the way, do you notice how when I mentioned the presupposition, you're like, well, we both have presuppositions. At this point, we have not asserted anything just because we assume that to be the case. Where
Yeah.
you yourself has said, well, you have to be moved by the Spirit or something else. So your presupposition and our imaginary you have a presupposition. We have the accusation of presupposition, but we have not presumed anything.
Well, you did. You presume that the authors of the New Testament were in error. That is a presupposition.
No, I can demonstrate it, and also I want to say
you can't demonstrate that because they did not see the Old Testament the same way people did back then.
Wait, John, but real quick, let's clarify.
I already made that point.
But Joe, listen, understand. Saying that someone had made an error is not a presupposition. That's an assessment or an analysis of the evidence in front of them.
Okay. We're both looking at the same evidence. The Jews in the first century who sided with Jesus, were looking at the same evidence, the Old Testament.
Okay.
They saw it differently in that the Old Testament is not designed, never was designed to give you a direct prophecy of Jesus. If that were the case, they would have known who he was and would not have crucified him.
Why
the Old Testament, New Testament goes on to say.
But Joe, understand. I want you to understand.
You have an assumption. Hold on, let me finish, please.
Go ahead.
You do have an assumption, a huge one. You assume that the Old Testament writers were trying to render Jesus directly in their prophecy. The Old Testament writers are writing as they're led of God. They are prophesying in part. They may not have even known what the heck they were talking about or Jesus. They didn't have Jesus in mind. This is a later revelation. When the New Testament comes and the apostles come, they are now given that revelation. That we're not saying that Isaiah when he's writing. Isaiah is writing, he's prophesying about what's going to happen, and it happens right away. Okay, so that's the revelation, and that's the prophecy, and it's revealed right away. Okay,
No,
we're not
'cause-
arguing he was writing, necessarily.
That's a
But do, you
code.
Jesus in mind.
but do you understand that revelation after the fact is just reporting? It doesn't count as a revelation if it's after the fact.
Okay.
So the writers who are saying, "Oh, this is proof that he fulfilled the prophecy," all they're doing is they're finding prophecies and fulfilling them through the text.
It's
Because
called it's called Pesher.
And the argument was that was intended. God did not want to reveal in an explicit way,
How
at
do you know?
least. That's the argument that the New Testament writers are making. First Corinthians.
Where is that in the Old
8.
Testament?
Where is that in the Old? Okay, the Old
And even before we
Testament.
get, wait,
The
John,
Old
even
Testament
before we
speaks
get there,
about.
but
The Old Testament does speak about things that are going to be revealed later, that are being concealed in the present time. Okay?
But do you
where?
understand that the text being self-fulfilling, I mean, the text being evidence of itself makes no sense. Text cannot be testament to itself. Do you understand that?
It is the same testament. That's the point that the New Testament writers, the apostles, Jesus was making. That this is the fulfillment. That Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. So, the Old Testament is the historical correspondence. It has these prophecies have a historical correspondence. We're not denying that, but the Old Testament is giving us what we call, or doing what we call in literature, foreshadowing. It's giving you hints. It's not designed to spell it out for you explicitly. So because it doesn't do that, you say, oh, that's incorrect, because Jesus doesn't fulfill every jot and tittle of this story. It's not designed to do that.
Well, I'm sorry. Are you old enough to remember Nostradamus when that was a big thing? When did Nostradamus ring a bell?
I do remember Nostradamus.
Okay,
yeah.
So there was a time where there was this guy named Nostradamus. He wrote really vague and kind of whatever. And whenever there was a major event, somebody pulled Nostradamus out of their ass and said there was one time he described a snake wrestling a gorilla, and that's proof that one day Berlin is going to go to war with Poland or whatever. Like it's like astronomy. Like if you can look at a thing, and if you're motivated and you have this motivated credulity, you can make things sound like whatever you want it to sound like. And if you're coming with a presupposition, you could look at, any text, and if you know that it's important that fulfills a prophecy, you could find a way to twist meanings and metaphors and symbolism to say what you want it to say.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. But my response simply is that God knew that, and that's why he sent his son to give you the Old Testament prophecy, which is cryptic, which is symbolic, and then he gives you the right interpretation through his son. Okay, so that there is no question about what this text means.
But you're using the son's divinity to prove the son's divinity.
No, I'm using resurrection, which is a historical fact.
Can you demonstrate it? If you think it's a fact, can you demonstrate it?
Can I demonstrate it? What do you mean?
Yeah, can you demonstrate it? You claim it's a historical fact. Can you demonstrate it? Because we have no evidence.
What do you mean by demonstration? What do you want? A video footage? What do you mean by demonstration?
Do we have any actual record of this happening from contemporary witnesses?
Historically, yes. The Apostle Paul is a contemporary of Christ.
20 years after the fact.
Yes, that's a contemporary.
Mm-hmm. Is he an actual witness to it?
Yes, we do.
No, he's not.
Yes,
nope.
we do believe he was.
Nope.
He was actually persecuting the Christians.
He only claims. The only thing Paul makes a claim. He makes a claim that Jesus appeared to him Jesus appeared to him. The Greek word that he uses, opthe, can mean that it's an internal revelation type deal, like a feeling. It doesn't necessarily mean that he actually saw him. And then furthermore, hold on, Jill, you have to calm down a little bit, please, okay? And then furthermore, he says the same thing when he claims that 500 people plus the disciples. He says that when the disciples saw him and when the 500 people saw him, he makes a claim that it was in that he says it's opthe. He uses the word opthe,
Okay.
which again can refer to an internal revelation type deal. So Paul didn't actually see the resurrection.
Okay.
He only
Did you?
is reporting later. Jill, I don't know.
Paul didn't see the
I don't know why you're
resurrection.
trying to interrupt me, Jill. I don't know why you're trying to interrupt me.
Wait.
So,
Because you're going off on a tangent here.
no, I'm explaining. I'm explaining why you're wrong.
Okay, but it's irrelevant because
no, it's not irrelevant.
okay,
Jill.
go ahead and tell us Paul didn't see, but that's irrelevant. That does not make him. That's nothing to do with him being a contemporary.
So
you moved the goalpost. First, you said he wasn't a contemporary.
I specifically said contemporary witnesses. I specifically said contemporary witnesses.
Is Paul a contemporary of Jesus? Yes.
He's a contemporary writer writing about the fact that other people claim they saw this, but
he is a contemporary
himself. Okay. Jill, I don't know why you're interrupting me. Are you scared to let me speak?
Wait. Johnny, I acknowledge that you're both interrupting each other. So let's.
You don't have to see the actual crime to be a contemporary of the event. So if I'm a contemporary of, people who survived 9/11, so I could write a history on 9/11. I would be considered a contemporary of people who lived during that time. Whether or not I saw the event directly with my own eyes is besides the point. But again, you're going to keep moving the goalpost until it's out of the stadium.
Who moved the goalpost? How did I move the
goalpost? You said, was he a contemporary? I said yes. Then you moved the goalpost.
Temporary witness.
So did he see? Did he see with his own eyes?
So
That's moving the goalpost.
But wait, Johnny. But real quick, we don't even have to sit there and nitpick about the word contemporary. We're still, Jill. You're still going back to you believe that Paul was given this divine inspiration, so now he could speak about things that he was not in the room to witness.
He was not in the room to witness. He was a contemporary of a historical
I'm not talking about historical. Let's not use that word. How did Paul know?
Now he has to have to be he has to actually be in the room.
Quite frankly, how did he answer the question? How did Paul know Jesus?
How did Paul know Jesus?
Yes. How are they related?
He met Jesus on the road to Damascus.
That's the claim.
That's the claim.
That's the claim, right? That's the historical claim, right?
No, that's the Paulian claim.
He's writing history, right? Prove it wrong. You don't just say history. Well, hold on, guys. We don't just say history is wrong because we don't like the render.
That's not what we're saying it's wrong. I'm not saying.
Okay, then what's your evidence that Paul is writing a history? He's writing things that aren't true? Does he make any mistakes?
No. What I'm saying.
Does Luke make a mistake? Luke was a historian.
Listen,
a meticulous historian.
What I'm saying is Paul's testimony. Paul's testimony is Paul's testimony. It is not a shared history.
Paul's testimony is a testimony about the resurrection. It's a historical account. It's a historical account from a contemporary about Jesus Christ and his life and his teaching.
But your definition of contemporary is someone who lived within a certain amount of time.
That is the definition of contemporary.
But I'm saying,
that's not my definition. Hold on, that's not my definition of contemporary.
But what I'm trying to say is that still does not answer the question of
that's not my definition of contemporary.
What I'm trying to say to you, but that still doesn't answer the question of why we should care what Paul had to say.
Okay, great. If you don't want to accept, if you don't want to accept one historian for no reason at all, because you just don't want to care about him, then fine. If you don't care about Paul, you have no reason to reject him as far as the history is concerned.
Because he makes extraordinary claims. That's why
I accept that. That's what liberal scholarship is. That's what liberal scholarship is made up of now. That's why you have to you have to render all of your books now just based on sophistry and sensationalism.
Stop.
You
don't have any hard evidence. Show me hard evidence that Paul is not reliable historically. That his history is.
Show me hard evidence that he is. That's the thing. And again, I'm not trying to. I've been really quiet, so I'm really trying to get to the bottom of this here, man. At the end of the day, all you have is a strongly held belief that what's written in that book must be true because that book says it has to be true. And then when I ask you for evidence, you're like, well, a guy in the book who wrote the book says it's true. And then I said, well, how can we believe him? You're like, well, you don't have to believe him. You could simply reject them because your heart is hardened or some bullshit like that. Because at the end of the day, if you want to talk about a shared reality, which is what the Bible is, you need to share the reality with us. Not you've decided that Paul was touched by an angel or something like that. So you really need to come with more than just claims. And you cannot use the Bible as evidence. You need to come with more than
just your claims. Because your claims is that Paul is not reliable. Right. You haven't provided one shred of evidence for that.
So why am I not more
credible? Paul is a historian. Luke is a historian writing in the 1st century about
Right.
Jesus, what is your evidence that we can't trust their history?
What is
where
your
did Luke
evidence
write
that
about
you
Do you
can't
have
Jesus?
trust
any
mine?
hard evidence, or do you have just conspiracy theories?
So then,
Where did
how
Luke write about him?
Luke was a meticulous historian. He
Yeah, but
wrote
where
about
where did where did Luke write about him?
where did Luke write about who? Paul?
Jesus. Where did Luke write about Jesus?
Luke had a scribe. If you're asking, did he pen it with his own hand?
No, I'm just asking
Yeah,
in
scribe.
general. Where is our testimony from Luke? Where is it?
Luke is found in the New Testament. You mean the book
Where?
of Luke?
Oh, can you demonstrate that this was actually created by Luke or created by a scribe for Luke? Can you demonstrate that claim to be true? Because the
Okay,
name, because the
so
name,
can you demonstrate the Washington cross to Delaware? Can you
Because the name
demonstrate Washington cross to
attributations are in the
Delaware?
late second
You see?
century, Jill. Late second century is where we finally get attributations for the names. The names are not original to the manuscripts. For example, Matthew P1, the earliest manuscript we have, the fragment, has no name attached to it, but it is indeed the Gospel of Matthew. So we already know that they're just anonymous manuscripts that were later given names for authority. Specifically, Irenaeus in the second century was the first to name Luke, and I believe John were the ones he did. Earlier than that, Mark tells us, sorry, not Mark, Papias tells us that he doesn't actually attribute the name Gospels he doesn't attribute names to the Gospels, but he tells us that Matthew and Mark wrote manuscripts, but the manuscripts he describes don't fit with what we have. And so we have no reason to accept apostolic authorship, and specifically Acts. Whoever wrote Acts, the whole story of Damascus and Paul seeing Jesus on the road to Damascus is what Acts says. Paul's writings don't actually say that.
So the Gospel of Luke was widely regarded by scholars as highly reliable. So you guys are going to have to come up with more than just conjecture and
Oh, really?
conspiracy
You think
theories.
you think it's
So
reliable?
he lists, yeah, and I'll tell you why, and
I'll
why
tell you
you
why it's
don't have
not.
an argument that
I'll
it's
tell you why
not.
it's not.
Sure. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear some hard evidence, not
Sure.
conspiracy.
When was Jesus born? What
So
year?
hold on, let me tell you why it's reliable, why actual credible scholars say
Sure,
it's
try it.
reliable.
Try to tell me. Go
Okay.
ahead. I'll
But
love this.
it makes several details. It gives several details and historical accounts. If they're not historical, then they would get something wrong. But he is meticulous. Luke gives precise detailing of first century people, places, particulars, customs. He says, yes, he is making a claim, like all historians when they write, is that this narrative, especially if it's an ancient historian, that it's based on eyewitness testimony. So we can't try to turn Luke and try to critique Luke as we would a modern history account or historical account. That's just not how scholars do it.
Sure, Jill. So when was Jesus born, Jill? Do you know?
Scholars suggest somewhere between, the Bible doesn't give us an exact date.
It does. It does.
No, it doesn't give us an exact date. Scholars suggest somewhere between 4 and 6 BC, BCE.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So you're correct. I'm not saying that the Bible itself gives us like an exact year. I'm saying that 6 what?
6 and 4.
Yes, 6 and 4 BC. Yes, you are correct. That is what scholars say. Some scholars also include 7. I don't think so. I think it's between 4. I think it's between 5 and 6. The reason I don't think it's between 4 is because 4. We'll get there in a second. So, do you know? So Matthew 2 makes a claim that Jesus was born during the reign of King Herod. Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Which Herod is it referring to? Do you know?
Which Herod? The Herod that put the curse out on for the firstborn to be killed, and
so it's specifically referring to Herod the Great, and we know that this is Herod the Great because later in Luke, Matthew 2, it tells us that after Herod's death, his son Archelaus was ruling in his place. Well, Herod the Great had a son, Archelaus. He had I think he had 3 sons or 2 sons, one of those. There was Archelaus, and then there was Herod. What's the other one? I forget. But yeah, so he had 2 or 3 sons, and one of them was Herod Archelaus. Great. So that means that Jesus had to have been born before 4 BCE because Herod the Great died in 4 BC. He died specifically around the springtime in March 4 BCE. Sorry, not March. Just somewhere around in the spring of 4 BCE. That's a good one. That's an easy one. When was Jesus born according to Luke? What does Luke tell us? Luke 2. What does Luke 2 tell us about Jesus' birth?
Luke, I have to look that one up. I think he doesn't. I don't think Luke tells us Luke tells us about the narrative.
Oh, you'll love this. Luke
Right.
2 makes a claim that Jesus was born during the census of Quirinius. The census of Quirinius was in 6 CE, 10 years after Herod the Great died. So we have two different authors.
No. Luke is not telling you Jesus was born
Mhm.
after
Yeah,
the
you-
census was completed. He's
during
telling you he's born
during the census. Yeah, the
right.
census took place in 6.
Yeah, no, he's not giving you the date when the census was completed in 6.
Do you want me to
So
grab my Bible so I can read it for you?
No, listen.
Actually,
to what I'm telling you. Hold on,
objective, real quick.
relax.
Could you pull up Luke 2
Can I
on your
finish my
thing?
point, please? You're missing the point.
Well, I'm
Luke
just going
is not
to
saying Jesus was born. For example, I was born during the census of 1980. I was born during the census of 1970. Okay, that's not telling me whether or not I was born in 71, 72, or 73, 74, or 75. The census is usually, let's say the census is completed in 79. Okay? That doesn't mean that I
Someone's
was born in
microphone is.
70. That doesn't mean that I was born in 79.
So, objective, can you pull up Luke 2 for me real quick?
So pulling up Luke 2 is not going to help you because
Oh,
Luke
it is.
is
I'm
not
going to read
communicating.
exactly
He's
what
not
it says to you. You're
communicating
not
the
going to like what
exact.
it says.
He's not
Jill, you're not going to like what
communicating.
it says. Jill, calm down. If you're
I
not,
do
if it's
like
gonna
what it
help,
says.
don't worry
I'm
about it.
familiar with.
Don't be scared.
I'm telling you
Don't be
this
scared,
argument
Jill.
was the. Hold on, brother. You don't have to tell me I'm not going to be scared. I'm telling you this argument was debunked decades ago.
Oh, it wasn't. So specifically,
Luke is not
Luke
giving you an
2,
exact
Jill, I don't know
date.
why you interrupted Jill.
Luke is not giving you an exact date when Jesus was born or year when Jesus was born.
He is.
No, he's not.
So you haven't read it. It's fine. So Luke 2 makes the claim that Jesus was born during the census of
Pulling it up.
Quirinius.
During the census.
Hold on, Johnny. Johnny, hold on. I'm pulling it up right now so everybody can read along with us. Give me a
Not
second
after
here.
the census was completed. It was completed in 6 CE. Dun, 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 dun.
When did it begin? Because I bet you don't know. I bet you don't know when
it began. More than likely, it began under Herod and
No,
ended
false.
under Quirinius.
So I know you don't know why the census even started. That's okay. I'll tell you. So after Herod Archelaus was killed by the government, he didn't try to do a census. So specifically, Herod Archelaus, he was a very cruel tyrant, and that's the reason why the Romans deposed him. So they deposed him, and that's when Quirinius became the governor and took the census. So the census of Quirinius occurred in 6 CE, which is why Luke 2 says that Jesus was born during the census. You can look this up. Go to Wikipedia, look up census of Quirinius, and look up when the census started. It'll tell you that the census began after Archelaus was deposed. That's the whole reason the census happened, is because Archelaus was deposed, and the Romans annexed Judah, and they turned it into a Roman Syrian province. Judea, they turned it into a Roman Syrian province. That's why the census began. Jill, I don't know if you didn't know this or not, but yeah.
Listen, I also want to make this point.
Very simple response to this, and I already alluded to it, but
hold on.
It went past your head for some reason. the Luke here is describing a census that he is arguing began under Herod the Great. Herod the Great made a grand decree to count the entire world, or the Roman world, right? The quote unquote world. So we don't believe that included just one census of one region. Remember, this is just one region that's being censored. And if we take into account how long it took in ancient history, to do a census just in one area, for instance, the province of Gaul, the Roman province of Gaul, took 40 years to complete their census. 40 years to complete one census. So when Matthew, or when Luke rather, says he's born under, he is saying he's born under that bracket. He's not saying that he is born on a specific year, or at a specific year, or 6 CE, which would be too late. Jesus was probably born between 6 and 4 BCE. Okay. And he's born under. That's why he had to return to his hometown, because he is originally from Bethlehem, where he likely owned a family plot or land. So this is, you can find help with this from Justin Martyr and Tertullian to church
Yeah, the
fathers.
first
They actually explain this, the nuances. It's a lot more than just reading on the surface, and much of the Bible has this problem when we are reading and we're trying to interpret the Bible from our perspective in the 21st century. Words like procreator, and what did that actually mean in Judea? So did that mean that he was the actual
he was the
king?
legate.
Point, right? Or the runner-up to be the leader, or the
The
main,
legate.
right? So Luke here actually is giving you more details than he needs to, which is probably causing people to look at it and say that he was wrong.
Full story.
But he doesn't even use the word for governor.
Oh, he does. The word I can't pronounce it, but that specific word is saying governing. So this is when he was governing Syria, when he was the governor of Syria. It's one of those. So specifically, Luke 2 reads, "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered, not under Herod, under Caesar Augustus. This was the first registration that was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to the house, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David."
Can you
He
do
went
me a
to be
favor and let's just
registered-
read it line by
He
line so
went
we
to
can try
be
to
registered
understand?
with Mary. Oh, sure, I'll read it from line.
Yeah.
In those
So
days,
well, hold
decree
on. Let
went
me
out
just
from-
respond to something you read. Notice Luke
Interrupted
there
me.
says this is a registration.
which is the
This
census.
is not the end of the census.
Nobody said
This
end of the
is
census.
just the registration.
I don't know why where you're getting the end of the census from. I'm not saying that he was.
Okay.
It's during the census.
So this is during the census, right? This is the
Which was in
this
6
is the
CE.
early stages of this census in this region.
Apparently you haven't read anything about the census of Quirinius. The census of Quirinius took place in 6 CE. That's when the registration occurred, was in 6 CE. You can literally go to the wiki page, or actually you can go to any source and you can see when the census started. So the census of Quirinius began in 6 CE. The reason for it was because Herod Archelaus was deposed by the government, the Romans. The Romans took Judea and they annexed it and they turned it into a Roman province. That's why the census began. And that's also why Quirinius became the governor of Syria, is because of this. All this stuff happened because Archelaus was deposed. And then in Luke 2, you get, in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. So this is the census of Quirinius. The first census of Quirinius was in 6 CE. We have no evidence of an earlier census. And then it goes on to say, that Jesus was born during the census, that they went to Bethlehem. That's when Mary gave birth, was while they were in Bethlehem. So this is a problem because this means that at the very most there's like a 9-year difference. Someone in the comments did correct me that we're not going to count. We shouldn't be counting the 0. So it would actually just be 9 years. So this is a 9-year contradiction.
That's perfect, because it normally a census would take that long to conduct. So
Can you
began in under Herod and was completed under Quirinius. Luke just simply says under Quirinius because he was the one who enacts this census in this particular region, the registration. So it was under him.
Yes. Do you have any evidence that
The original census is not under him, but it was completed under him.
Okay, where's the evidence that it began under Herod? Can you show me the evidence of this claim?
The evidence is in Matthew 1, where it says...
No. You cannot use the Bible. No, the Bible contradicts.
Can't use the Bible.
So,
why not?
So Matthew 2, right, makes the claim that Jesus was born under the reign of King Herod. No mention of a census happening under Herod the Great. No mention of a census happening there. Luke 2 is the part that mentions the census. So I'm asking you,
he wants to count the whole world. What do you mean? He says that he wants to count the whole world in Matthew.
I'm sure that's the case, but the census did not begin under Herod. That's what I'm asking you. What evidence do you have that this census began?
The fact that the text says that he wants to count the whole world.
Oh, so because he wants to do something, that means that he actually went through with it? Where's that at?
We're assuming that he did. It's the edict.
Presupposition.
The edict was for him to count the whole world.
So I'm going to ask you, So I'm going to need you to find me some actual evidence that the census of Quirinius began under Herod. You can't find me any. You're just going to go to the Bible says that Herod wanted to count the whole world. Well, where
was called the census. It was called the census of Quirinius correctly because that is the section or the part of the attempt to censor or to count the entire world. That was part of it. So he's connecting the or the birth of Christ to the census. And he's saying, for instance, if I were to say I was born under the census of Obama, the census could have started under Bush, but it was completed under Obama. So rightfully, a historian would not be incorrect in saying that I was born under the census of Obama. That doesn't mean Obama necessarily started the census.
So can you show me any evidence that the census began under Herod?
Again, what evidence would you need to see that this is not, I'm not suggesting that this particular count, for instance, if we were to say that, let's say Trump wanted to start a census and he starts with the state of California, that's he's going to get to the other states eventually.
So this is the other problem, is that these censuses wouldn't actually count the whole world either. That's the other problem, but that's irrelevant. The problem is that Luke 2 says that he was born during the census of Quirinius. The census of Quirinius was a census of the province of Judea taken in 6 CE. There is no evidence that the census ever occurred earlier. And just because Herod, whichever Herod you're referring to, I assume you're referring to Herod Archelaus maybe, just because he said that he wanted to count the whole world doesn't mean that he actually went through with it, because we don't have evidence of that census occurring. What we have is
this is not
by Quirinius.
This is not kept. These records were not kept by.
Okay, but so then that's a problem on your. Then that's a problem for you then.
Okay, these records were kept in. They may not have even been kept as we would have with the Greeks and the Romans later.
So then basically what it sounds like is, trust me, bro, you want me to trust the idea that that the census actually began under Herod. I'm saying I won't just trust that. I would need evidence that that's the case, because so far what we have, actual historical evidence from people like Josephus, for example, tells us that the census of Quirinius began in 6 CE, and the reason for the census starting is because of Herod Archelaus being deposed, and then Quirinius taking control of Judea, becoming the governor of Syria. That's why it happened. So I would need some kind of actual evidence, some kind of actual historical evidence of some kind that the census actually began under Herod.
Because the historical evidence
I do need to jump in here, gentlemen. You guys have done a great job with this. I think we're at an impasse here. I've heard the word census about 50 times in the last 10 minutes. I think that we're not going to make any headway on this. A couple of questions I would have, observations. I don't want to ask open-ended questions here, because I did say at the beginning of the stream I need to wrap it up in about 3 hours, and and I am actually coming up on that. And I like to be respectful to everybody and give everyone an uninterrupted last word. So I think what we should do, in all fairness, is let Jill go first, so that, because he's kind of been in the hot seat and he's handled it with a lot of grace. I got to give him credit for that. He's been very polite, and he's getting questions coming from all sides. So well done to you, Jill. Before I turn it over to you, let me just make a couple observations while you're here. So if you want to make any comments about what I'm going to say, then that's at least you have something to work with here. But I'm not aware of any historical evidence that anybody under Roman province had to return to any other land of their ancestors to partake in a census. There were censuses, but they were all local. I'm not aware of a single piece of evidence. So you might have some kind of evidence that I'm just simply not aware of. So you might want to reference that, because that's the other issue with this, is that there's no reason to think that Joseph would have had to return anywhere to partake in a census. The other issue is that Joel pointed out, and kind of tongue in cheek, but he's absolutely right, is that Jesus, so supposedly Joseph had this land, right, from his ancestors, but then Jesus had to be born in a manger in some Sorry about that, guys. So the gosh, lost my train of thought. My wife distracted me there. So yeah, so it said Jesus was born in a barn somewhere, but Joseph supposedly had land. So that's kind of a strange, I never even really observed that before, but it is kind of funny. So Jill, why don't you go ahead and have the floor uninterrupted? Take a chance to say what you need to say, and then be sure to tell people where they can find you. I'll make sure to get a link to your YouTube channel in the description. And since you joined the show and we're so polite and everything, and if anybody wants to talk to Jill and find out more about what he's all about, then you can just access that in the description of this video. So Jill, I'll give you the center stage here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'll just try to respond to some of what was said about Luke. And this is just another case, as was the first two, of, that's your interpretation. Atheists love to say that about Christians, but they do the same thing when it comes to the biblical text. They have an interpretation as well. So there are several theories. I gave you one. There's a two census theory. That one is pretty credible. Some scholars suggest that Luke 2 is talking about a registration, like I alluded to. My understanding is a combination of many of them, but the 6 CE event was sort of like the second register, or the second of many, because places like this, you have to have many local, as you mentioned, local registrations and censors, not just one big one and it's over. In 6 CE, therefore Bible wrong. So then there's what they call the flash forward theory. There's a translation shift theory. So there are several interpretations of the text that would reconcile these accounts. So the idea is to go into the Bible fairly and look at it without any presuppositions, or believing anyone is being nefarious or purposely, legendarily corrupting the text. I just don't see why that's fair. But thanks for having me on, and looking forward to our debate. I'm upset I'll have to wait until May, but
give you plenty of time to prepare. Yeah, no, I wish I could do it sooner, because I know that is kind of tough having to put something like that. But I do take these formal debates seriously, and I put in a lot of hours preparing for these. I think the last debate I did on objective morality with Mark Reed, I put in almost 100 hours of preparation time, and that's a lot of time that I have to find that I just don't have. So it is unfortunate the way I have to do it, but I appreciate you being flexible with that. It is going to be a fun debate. Robin will be a fair mod. I give you my word as a gentleman that, she absolutely is going to treat everyone fairly. The clock, is what manages the time. We'll stick to the times. We'll be, I don't engage in a lot of ad hominem and stuff like that. When I do my debates, I stick to the topic. I've always been very polite, and every single person I've ever had a formal debate with has said that I'm a very polite interlocutor. So I will treat you with that same respect. And thank you for stopping by. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, of course. Same also.
Yeah, I do appreciate you stopping by. Joel actually highlighted, and I put that comment up on the screen. Yeah, compliments to you, because you were on the hot seat a bit, and you actually were a perfect gentleman and did a good job. You defended your position, and I think there was a lot of honesty there. I think that does expose some of the problems personally, but at least I think you're being honest to say, hey, this is how Christians interpret it. We don't expect other people to interpret it this way, so on and so forth. And I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's honest. I think that there is an interpretation that Christians are getting to it, that other people outside are not, just not accepting. And I think there are reasons we don't accept it, but at the same point in time, I do think that's at least an honest approach to it. So I think you did well there. All right, brother. If you could just show yourself out, and I appreciate you for stopping by.
All right. God bless. See you guys next time.
I do have one. I had one for Jill. I've been waiting on for like an hour, but
no, it's Dark Light. I'm sorry. Well, you will have the floor uninterrupted here. You could say your thing. Jill will still probably watch or listen. I'm sure, because he's going to expect comments to be made about what his position and stuff like that. So feel free to address him.
Okay. Well, it's something that me and him covered before when we were talking for a few hours in private. So this is Matthew 5:29 through 30, and this is one of my favorite ones. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. Now, when I brought this up to Jill, he said, well, of course, that they're not being literal. That is just a literary device being hyperbolic. But so my question to Jill with stuff like that is, who has the cipher? Was there a given cipher which clearly delineates what is literal and what is being hyperbolic and used as a literary device? And we all know there is no such cipher, so it's all subjective. So my point is, anytime that there is something written down and you're not taking it literally, such as the verse I just gave, what you're really saying is, I know better what the author of that text meant than he who wrote it. And I wanted to pin Jill down on this, on if he really believes that the Bible was authored by God or not, because I'm not quite clear on if he believes that, which most Christians do, right? Most Christians will say that the Bible is the word of God. You know, that's something they like to use. So that's just one of many examples, you know, of, you know, it's a verse that is very uncomfortable. And if you were to take it literally, there would be a bunch of one-handed cycloptic ass motherfuckers running around. But that's not what we observe. So I just find it amusing how that they can kind of pick and choose what is literal and what is being used as hyperbole. That's what I was just holding on to for an hour, and that's something I'll bring up with him next week when we have our discussion. One thing I do appreciate about Jill is he does have an answer for anything, and you know he never concedes. And something that Bionic brought up earlier, he said that he doesn't like it when people say that they know that they're right regardless. I don't believe in knowledge. There's no such thing as knowledge. Things can only be perceived. Things can't be known. But I'm right there in that same boat with Jill. I am a theist, and I will invent whatever mental gymnastics I have to justify my imaginary friend. But at least I admit that, Jill. At least I admit that. And then we got this thing right here. And thanks for having me on, OE. I am the brightest night. I'm the darkest light, and I am ascending, as are we all. The dark light is upon you. Stay beautiful, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
I love this outro. It's very Batman-esque, and it just got a ring to it, man. That's great stuff. It's always great to have you stop by the channel, Dark Light. One of these times, we're gonna have to get into some of your theology more deeply. And if you said you might be able to email me some stuff that I can look over beforehand, so that way I have a kind of a grounding on what it is, and I'd love to have you do that, and we'll find a way to make time, even if we have to set up like a special stream, since I'm booked so far out. Maybe we could do it like on a Saturday and just record it. We might even do an extra live stream or something. It just depends on whatever. I don't want to step on other people's toes, so I don't know what the streaming schedule is on Saturdays. You know what I mean? Maybe we may just record it and then post it during the week or something like that. But I'll look out there and see what's going on. We'll be in touch. You've got my email address.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys have a great night.
Very good. Okay.
Bye, Dark.
And Chris, why don't I give you the floor next, and then I think I want to ask you a couple questions. Let's give Johnny, since he's hot under the collar, he's got something definitely he wants to say about all this, and he did a great job. Before I turn this over to you, Johnny, you really did a good job today. I'm really impressed. You knew exactly what rebuttals to which argument. There was a lot of shifting arguments. I don't want to say that Jill was shifting the goalposts necessarily. I think it just kind of organically came up in the conversation from what I was seeing, and I think that you were really fluid with everything, and your argumentation was on point. I think, just like everything you've done on this series with the Failed Prophecy series, your scholarship, I mean, your assessment is in line with everything that I've heard from critical scholarship. I haven't heard you make any claims that are like out in left field or unfounded or anything like that. Everything you've said thus far, and we've been doing this, I think this is our fifth or sixth episode of this, and you've just hit every nail on the head. You're just doing such a great job. So I'll turn the floor over to you and just say thank you so much for your hard work today as well.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Objective. Before I go, I just want to say, like, he was super dishonest. It's a shame. It really is. Because, like, we had such a nice conversation, but he just really didn't want to accept that these problems existed. It's just pure cognitive dissonance. When we bring up an issue, he just brings up apologetics that we can easily refute, but he just keeps going in circles with them. It's like he doesn't want to give them up, and it's sad because I used to be in that position at one point too. I feel like a lot of ex-Christians were in that position at one point. Although it didn't take me very long to finally admit that I was wrong, but still. But I did appreciate the conversation. It was a nice conversation. It gave me a chance to hone my skills some more. And I'd like to thank Objective Ethics for giving me the opportunity to do this. I love that the first Sunday of every month that we do these topics, and then we open up the panel for people to come up and hang out with us for a bit. I really appreciate that. I'd like to say thank you, Objective. And that's it.
Oh, it's been my great pleasure and great honor to have you participate. I think, let me get this so everybody knows what's going on. Yeah, I think, Johnny, that, I don't know, it's been a few months now, but I do believe that the first live stream I did, my first official one, of course, not the hack jobs that I was testing out the equipment and stuff like that, like where Chris saw me talking to myself with no volume. That was, I love telling that story, man. That was so funny. But anyway, the actual official live stream, I think the first one was our first failed prophecy. And I believe we did we do the virgin birth, or was it or was it Suffering Servant? Either one of those I think was the first one, but that's how this whole channel got started. And I think that we have this regular show that we do on the first Sunday of every month has kept it consistent and given me something that I know I have planned ahead of time. So it really took a burden off of me as a new content creator, especially trying to figure out what am I going to do with each show. And now that the show's picked up so much steam and I've got people who are really wanting to participate, I've got guests scheduled months in advance, which is nice because, again, it takes a lot of pressure off of me to figure out what I'm going to do each week. But you're really a big reason why this channel has been as successful as it has. And I am surprised that we haven't gotten more comments left, pushback from apologetics in the prophecy series. But the reason is because the arguments that have been laid out have been in line with critical scholarship. So it's an uphill battle that the apologist has to climb. And we saw that today with Jill. Jill was trying his best, but we saw a lot of what I would say cognitive dissonance. And that's why I don't generally get into these debates with theists, because I think I said this last week or the week before, but when I start to get into these conversations with theists, what ultimately ends up happening, if you know your stuff, like you did today, you did such a great job coming back with the correct rebuttals, you end up pushing the theist, whether it's a Christian, a Muslim, whatever, you end up pushing them into one of two corners. One is either cognitive dissonance or the other is moral bankruptcy, depending on what the conversation is. And so either one of those places, I just don't feel like I'm being, I don't know how to say it. It doesn't benefit anybody at that point. You know what I mean? The reason I think the formal debates benefit people is really for the audience to see what happens and reflect on it later. You know what I mean? But in the actual conversation, you're not changing any minds. It's the same thing. You're getting people to double down on cognitive dissonance or moral bankruptcy. And that is exactly what we're going to see in my debates against Jill and Toronto Bible Study, is they're going to be biting the bullet on moral bankruptcy. They're going to be having to defend the most horrific things that the Bible has to offer, and the Bible has a lot of horrible things to offer. So that's just the way these conversations go. Today we saw the cognitive dissonance. There was the argument from authority, which is a fallacy that he was committing. There was there was two other ones. Oh, one was the sharpshooter fallacy that he was committing as well, I noticed. So just what he said, well, there's all kinds of apologetic responses. He didn't call it apologetic, but there's all kinds of different responses that we can throw at this. You just got to pick your favorite one. Well, that's got a bit of a sharpshooter fallacy. Just fire as many shots as you can at the wall, then go draw a circle, and whatever's inside the circle ends up being a bullseye, And there was another fallacy that was committed there. I called out two in a row, and I can't remember what the other one was. I'd have to go back and look, but that's three fallacies that Joe committed in his argumentation today. So that's tough, and he kind of backed himself into that corner, but that's where the believer has to go. And the unfortunate thing, well, I'll save this. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. I'll save that for my closing remarks. So anyway, great job, Johnny. And I'll look forward to seeing you next month. Don't forget Richard Carrier is coming next week. So if you're a fan of Richard Carrier, like I am, do check that show out. I'm really excited about it. All right, Chris, the floor is going to be yours. And any remarks? And thank you so much for being a bit of a peacekeeper. Really appreciate you did that last week as well. And it does help me a little bit because I'm not always being the bad guy, but and also it helps me to understand what you guys as the audience or the viewers and the participants, what kind of vibe you guys are getting from the atmosphere and stuff. So I appreciate you speaking up.
So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I went to this symposium on pharmacology, and there was these two pharmacists getting into an argument where one of them had proposed that he had developed this new antibiotic, and he went at lengths about how awesome this antibiotic was. And then another pharmacist was saying, but unfortunately, with that level of, I forget the chemical it was, then you're gonna create kind of a broad spectrum antibiotic when we're really looking towards kind of targeted antibiotics. So they went back and forth and they talked about the numbers and whatever. And then about 2 hours later, another pharmacist said, yeah, the formula you wrote can only exist in an anoxic, an environment that has no oxygen. The second that medication is in the air, that carboxyl group is going to turn into cyanide. And then everybody in the room just kind of went quiet. They're like, oh yeah. So with all due respect to both Jill and Johnny, that's how I felt listening to you going into the nitpicky of what the verses say. Because for me, sitting there nitpicking about this, then that, and then the Greek means this, and blah, 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 none of that answers the question about what does any of that have to do with the divinity of Christ? What does any of that have to do with how we live our lives in 2026? None of that tells us anything scientifically, historically, morally, ethically. So I feel like getting into those weird kind of like nitpicky verse for verse, fantastic. I'm glad you're having it. Just like there's people right now in the room arguing whether or not Thanos did something wrong, or there's people in the room talking about whether or not Harry Potter really was the chosen one or whatever. Great for that fandom. But when we're having these conversations about what actually makes sense, when the rubber meets the road, when we're trying to raise families, when we're trying to write laws, when we're trying to decide who gets rights and what is justice, all of those questions remain untouched. When we're saying they're talking about whether or not the Greek word for young woman actually means virgin and all that stuff. And that's why I'm not going to say check out, but again, it just feels like really we're arguing about the color of a fairy's wings when we really get into those verses. And again, that's not an insult to anybody, but just understand once you follow down that pathway, you're missing the forest from the trees. And that's something I was trying to pull out of Jill, is to say to them, you're going so much into this is the truth and that's the truth and this is what we know, and you're putting so much authority, and you're not answering the fundamental question: why should we care what Paul has to say? And where's the scrutiny? The same scrutiny you hold to John Smith, or the millions of North Koreans or South Koreans or North Koreans who believe that Kim Jong-un was born and there was a double rainbow and the skies opened up and that he played a perfect round of golf. He got 18 holes in ones. Why should we believe any of that is true just because a bunch of people said it? And that's what I would say. Like, bring that same level of scrutiny you do to the Hindus and the Buddhists and whomever. But why do you create that carve out when we're talking about something that involves your God? So I'm just saying, being intellectually honest. And I hope that came across, that I wasn't trying to pick on Jill. I wasn't even trying to be antagonistic to him. I actually played the part of a neutral third party who pretended like I didn't know nothing, and I was looking for the convincing argument. And I got to be honest, I got nothing from nobody, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if I'm going to take Jill at his word, for me to find Jill's arguments convincing, I have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, by presupposing so many things. Because if you put on an equal scale as every other kind of fairy tale story, every other false prophet, every other nutcase in Central Park claiming that they hear the voice of God, then he brought nothing to the table. And like I said, what's the difference between Paul's ranting and raving about hearing the voice of Jesus and the patients I used to give fucking Thorazine to when they heard the voice of Jesus? And that's my question to them. And that's my word. And that's all I gotta say.
Well said. and I witnessed it, so it's a fact. It happened.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, and real quick, I'm just going to, as a thing, and also in case anyone thinks I'm like biased, I've held objective ethics feet to the fire when he was making his arguments about objective ethics. I was holding him to the same scrutiny, saying, "Hey, dude, get me. You're not landing the plane. I need you to get me there." So I'm not biased. I will do that to my friends. And I just think that's the best service I could provide for a person, is to kind of not make them earn every point. You know what I mean? So anyway.
Yeah, I absolutely do, and I respect that and I appreciate it. And you're not the only one. That's been a really great topic to get a lot of discussion about. Objective versus subjective morality is a fascinating conversation to have, and I've gotten so much better at making the argument over the last several months because so many intelligent people like yourself have pushed back Mark Reed. He's a great opponent in that debate. There's just a number of people I could think of probably who have pushed back on the objective versus subjective morality position. And as such, it's forced me to go back to the drawing table time and time again and shore things up. And so I'm pretty excited to have Dr. Carrier coming next week to kind of help explain, because some of the things that I've learned in my own studies of trying to figure out how to make this argument, nobody's going to really listen to my opinion about, like, David Hume, for example. You know what I mean? So hearing about how the guillotine works and what Hume actually intended with the is-ought problem, for example, because that's the biggest objection that I get, is people misunderstanding what Hume even meant with the is-ought problem and thinking that's a universal problem. David Hume himself did not say that. David Hume himself. Well, I'm just gonna let Dr. Carrier lay it out for you guys, because again, like I said, it'll be music to your ears, probably coming from somebody who's a PhD philosopher and actually he's a PhD historian, excuse me, but he's a peer-reviewed on this topic specifically. So he's definitely got the credentials to, and people can hand wave it away. I know a lot of people do not, are real critical of Carrier. I find that to be really disingenuous, because I don't think that a lot of that criticism comes from a heavy bias within what we talked about earlier with biblical scholarship and where that biblical scholarship even means, and the statements of faith and stuff like that. You've also got people who are financially tied to there being a historical Jesus. So I don't think the criticisms against Carrier are really fair, especially considering the fact that Carrier is kind of the poster boy for mythicism, but he's not the only mythicist. There's some really smart guys out there. In fact, I think double PhD, what's his name? Robert Price, I believe, is a mythicist as well, just off the top of my head. There's a number of guys who actually do support the mythicist position and have for many years, and it's actually gaining traction, is what I understand. So there may be some vindication for Carrier on that. And I do have a couple questions. I'm not a mythicist or historicist. I'm in the middle. I could care less, frankly, to be honest with you. It's not a conversation I find that interesting any more than I find the conversation about, did Alexander the Great really live? What I find interesting are the stories around that, the narratives that they paint around that, the historical fallout from what we became the Greco-Roman period, and so on and so forth. That's what's really most interesting. And then when it comes to the Jesus situation, what is most interesting is, and most relevant, is, what are people doing with those beliefs? Whether Jesus, whether it was a dude or not, who cares? What are people doing about it now? And what are they doing with that information? So I do have a couple of questions, because I have my own skepticism. I'm not convinced that there was a crucifixion. Even if there was a dude, I'm completely unconvinced that there's a crucifixion. And so most scholars who promote the historical Jesus narrative, they say, if we set aside all the supernatural stuff, we can accept, basically, I think there's like 3 or 4 basic claims that they claim. They say Jesus was born. There's a guy born named Jesus somewhere around the Bethlehem area in Judea, whatever you want to say, the province of Judea. There was, he was a preacher, right? He had disciples who claimed that they had seen him after he died and that he was crucified. Those are, I think, the 4 basic claims that everybody kind of agrees with, all the historicists agree with, whether they're believers in the supernatural or not. My issue is that with the crucifixion claim, there could have been a guy. Jesus was a very popular name. So there could have been lots of Jesuses, no doubt, that were rocking around in Judea. So I got no issue with that. I got no issue with there might have been preachers, people leaving some kind of, legacy behind as revolutionaries or whatever they might have been. And I got no issue with the fact that people obviously are claiming they saw him because they're writing stories about it, right? And so the issue that I have, though, is the crucifixion narrative. To me, that doesn't match up with what we see historically from Pilate. It doesn't match up with what we see historically with the Jews and the authority the Jews had in Rome. So I'm really curious to see what Richard Carrier will have to say about that, because every time I mention that I don't buy the crucifixion narrative, people are like, "Oh, of course he was crucified, because he would have been crucified for sedition. It was treason, and that would have been a death penalty for Rome." It's like, yeah, but he was actually, according to the narrative, he was really a blasphemer. at which point he wouldn't even have made it to Pilate.
Yeah.
He would have been stoned, blah, blah, blah. I'll lay it out to
Yeah.
Carrier and just see what he said. Maybe Carrier will say, no, if there was a guy, he probably would have been crucified. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I'm really excited to talk to Carrier next week. There was, go ahead.
Sorry, let me cut you to that point. But I even come from an even wider view. I'm like, let's pretend we get Jesus on that cross. Let's pretend he had thousands of followers. Let's pretend that he was, all those things. He was who they say he was, in essence, right? None of that still touches whether or not his death changed anything metaphysically, or none of that touches whether or not we are born with original sin. None of that. Like, even if we can convince that there was a guy named Jesus who was a threat to the status quo, and they killed him as a heretic, you still haven't answered the question about whether or not Adam ate an apple and whether we're all born with sin. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And that's why that doesn't get me anywhere closer to why I should believe in the divinity of Christ. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Brother Mark Reed said it the best. I absolutely love the way he articulated this. I heard it from him one time, and I say it all the time now. And I got to make sure to credit him, because he's really he's the first person I heard sum it up like this. I'm sure there's probably been other people, but I heard it first from Mark Reed. He said that. So he was talking about, I can't remember which evolution denier. It might have been Kanisha, but whoever it was. He said, so you're gonna tell me that you're going with instead of the well-founded, well-evidenced theory of evolution, you're going with the talking snake magic fruit theory.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
It shows just how ridiculous and nonsensical it is when you put it like that. It's so true. Yeah. The talking snake magic fruit theory, and that's what it is. And there are two issues that you come to. You come to the historicity of the situation. That when you talk about, at the very beginning, the whole thing, you talk about the prophecies. Did Jesus fulfill any of these things? So there's a real, like, a literal technical interpretation of all this stuff. Can it even be true? But then there's the ethical side of it. Is it even ethical to conceive of the way the narrative is painted out? And the answer is absolutely not. In either case, I don't think that as a literal narrative or historical event or whatever you want to call it, scientifically it doesn't hold up, historically it doesn't hold up. So literally the internally, the exegesis, Jesus doesn't fulfill any of these prophecies. And Jill actually, other than, I think he did say Micah 5:2, and he might think there are some literal prophecies that were fulfilled. Now, we've done a video on this channel. Johnny did a great job on Micah 5:2, so I encourage Jill to go back and watch that video, and then he can leave his comments in there or whatever he wants to do. Yeah, he did say that, like, these virgin birth, and I can't remember the other one they were talking about now, but weren't literal, that they didn't get filled literally. This is actually what Jill's describing without using the word. It's called pesher, and Jewish pesher is actually a very, very common. In fact, that's what Daniel was doing, right? Pesher. And so it's where you go back into the text and you read into it a future prophecy or match it up to something that's happening currently, and that it doesn't line up with the context of the text itself. And so it's known as pesher, and that's really what's happening here.
Sure.
But, okay, so I will thank. Any other closing words?
No, I mean, again, I could talk for hours and hours. But you said you had some question. I don't know if you wanted to ask me.
Yes, I did. Okay, no, sorry, I've got on my own train of thought there. Yeah.
No problem.
Would you be interested in coming by and having a one-on-one? Like, I offered a dark light. My Sundays are so jammed up. Now we can schedule it out into June. I'm perfectly fine with that. But I think, do I have your email address? I do, right?
You should. I shot you an email at one point.
Okay. Yeah.
Ironically about this guy. So I shot you an email. So you have my email address.
Yeah, we should set something up to see if maybe you'd be interested in doing like a recording midweek, or maybe I'll do a bonus live stream or whatever. I don't know, however we want to set it up, but we could do something like that. If I have enough notice, I could work my schedule around if you're in a hurry to get together, if you have anything specific. But you did send me a topic I thought was quite fascinating in that email that you wanted to discuss sometime. So if late June is too late for you or too long out in the distance, we can set something up ahead of time.
But again, it's not like my position is going to change. It's still going to be my point of view. So whenever, like, once your schedule clears up, like, I'm not trying to crowbar my way into a conversation. And to be honest, it's a topic that I can talk about any other time. You know what I mean? So if you want to set up a one-on-one kind of interview style where I kind of give my perspective, I'll even do a little presentation if you want. We can do that as soon as I have the time. But I'm not it's not a burning topic that, it's not related to the news where, after a while it's going to not be interesting. So whenever you want, like whenever I'm free and you're free, but it's not a
Yeah,
rush.
well, if you want to, I'll tell you what, why don't you, if you have presentations are always nice because the visual
Okay.
aids make it, one, more aesthetically pleasing. It makes it look like my
Sure.
stream is a lot more professional than it really is.
Well,
But it
I
does
can't
help the
get my
audience
channel
track.
to look professional, but I'm willing to do it for yours. No problem.
Yeah. So, if you get something
Okay.
together and just let me know
Okay.
what a date that's good for you. I'm basically anything like I think the third week of June and after is open. So if you want to just pencil one of those up, we can, because that's so far in the future, we could do that. Or if you want to get the presentation together and then just let me know, hey, I've got this ready, and we can figure out a schedule then. However you want to do it.
All right. Cool. Yeah, we could do that. One way or the other. Like I said, it's funny, just as a sidebar, like what I do for a living is I do teaching, and I do kind of like nursing education and stuff like that. So my strength is doing presentations and explaining like nursing concepts to lay people. So I'm happy to do it that way. But like I said, I'm willing to have a conversation. I'm even willing to sneak in just like my opinions if the topic comes up organically. If one day we're having a conversation about why people get diseases and the nature of sin, I would like step up to like, actually, can we have a conversation about this? And whatever. So whether it happens organically or if it happens because I send you that presentation, it's all the same to me. But we'll try to kind of pull it together and see what happens. So,
yeah, that sounds good. It might be a great during the open panel. I've got Austin coming by to talk evolution on the last Sunday of this month. I'm losing track of what date that actually is, but he's coming by the last Sunday of this month to talk about evolution. That might be a perfect time in the open panel to bring it up too.
I mean, I've been lucky. I will also say I've been lucky in these last 2 weeks, as you've noticed, I've been here is because my family stuff has kind of been fine. But I'm also like, I'm the chauffeur in the family. I'm kind of the guy, like I'm the honeydew guy. And like
I do know all about the honeydew list. Yeah, I've got one, going right now.
So that's that. I should let you get to that. But so that's why I apologize for my schedule not being, always as free. But again, one way or the other, if God ordains it, we will get together and share our message. The message that's on our hearts, I guess. You know what I mean? So,
I'm always down for some divine intervention. Absolutely. I'm not opposed to it.
I'm all for it.
I won't shake a stick at it. Absolutely. All right, brother. Thank you for stopping by. And I'll just do a quick outro here.
Did the ARC thing, like, how's that coming along? Are we getting the responses we wanted from that?
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. I should. Oh, gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. God damn it, I need to be mentioning that in my intros. I completely spaced that. Yeah, the ARC protest is coming. Thank you for your donation. I'm actually putting together. I'm going to be listing people's names below the link, just that of who's already participated in that. I have been talking to Joe and Austin and some other people about trying to set up some kind of a special show. I have a date already. I think that is one of my last dates I have set up. That's mid-June. And that will be some kind of special fundraiser show for the ARC protest. And I won't be able to attend, but what's that?
I'm curious, how are the numbers looking? Are we getting a response or are we still shouting in the dark here? Like what's going on with that?
No, I think actually, I have not been. I've been really busy with work. I haven't actually looked into the specific numbers on it, but Joe did post some comments on the Discord channel saying that things are coming along really nicely. He's already got some of the lodging reserved. So he's getting enough funds together to be at least able to do that. And he's looking at some other logistics, signage and stuff like that, building a stage material, whatnot. So I think they still have they definitely still need support, but it is coming along and they do have, like I said, they're already making financial commitments. So that means money is coming in. And then we will do a show in mid-June, and that show should give him a nice boost. I've got a few $100s I'd set aside. I'm going to throw to him, and that'll be a nice chunk for him. And then whatever we raise during that episode will help as well. And again, I want to make sure everybody knows that all this money is going to the organizers of the ARC protest. I'm not taking any cut or anything off the top. I'm actually donating my own funds as well. And I'm only offering for people to participate. I don't even know if I'm really asking. I'm just putting the offer out there because this is something I think is important. But normally I never talk finances on this show. I never ask you guys for money. And I don't, like I said, times are difficult for everybody. Gas prices and everything else is going through the roof. So I want you guys to make sure you know that if you can't afford to give anything, just passing the word around, watching the videos, supporting the streams, that is a support in and of itself. So don't feel like, you have to be financially tied to it. If you do have a few extra dollars, it doesn't, any donation helps, literally $5. I mean, it doesn't have to be hundreds of dollars or whatever. So just keep that in mind. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Chris. Thank you for that.
No problem. Good luck with all that. And I'm around. All right, buddy. I'm going to let you get to that honey-do list. If you need anything else, you know where to find me.
Sounds good. Sounds good, brother. Okay, so just couple things I want to talk about here just really quick, and I won't do too much of an outro because I'm already running behind what I said I wanted to today. Joel mentioned that Jesus fulfilled the prophecy, like typology, like with Jonah and the whale being in the fish of the belly for 3 days. Well, I don't know how much Jill has looked into other religions, world religions, and religions of Mesopotamia, from Sumer, from Babylon, from Acadia and Assyria, so on and so forth. And so there's what we call tropes, right? And religious tropes or themes that get reused and regurgitated, and the story gets kind of taken and repurposed, right? Depending on what the new religion is wanting to do, promote the new ideas, new ideologies, so on and so forth, cultural shifts, and this type of thing. So I just wanted to just kind of highlight here for you guys. This is just one example of what I'm talking about. This is a story of the dying and rising god Inanna. Okay, and this story is probably one of the. Actually, I don't want to do that. I'm going to screw myself here. Give me 1 second. So you guys know I'm so disorganized about this stuff. Okay, we do this here. Is this still active? Yes, it is. Okay, good. So you can find this on Wikipedia. You guys can actually, there's a ton of different gods that you could look into. There's Osiris myth. There's Dionysus. I mean, there's just a bunch of dying and rising gods. But Inanna was really very, very popular. This god was around for thousands of years, actually. And when he talked about Jonah, right? That the story of Jonah, scholars think that story with Jonah and the whale probably came up sometime shortly after at the beginning of the Second Temple period, which is when we see a lot of the Old Testament is being written in this time during the Second Temple period. Very, very little of it goes back to the First Temple, believe it or not. According to scholarship, you guys can take it or leave it however you want. But according to this myth here, Inanna was actually died and in the underworld for 3 days and then raised back up. And this is where you see Jonah goes into the belly of the fish for 3 days, and then you see Jesus. He dies and he's raised for 3 days. This is not a unique story that the Christians are telling at all. It's just a religious trope. And it just gets kind of rehashed. So Inanna was worshipped in Sumer as early as the Uruk period, circa 4000 to 3100 before the Common Era. And her worship was relatively localized before the conquest of Sargon of Akkad. During the post-Sargonic era, which we have a ton of historical evidence of, she became one of the most widely venerated deities in Sumerian pantheon. With temples across Mesopotamia, adoration of the Inanna Ishtar was continued by the East Semitic group, the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, who succeeded and absorbed the Sumerians in the region. And we know the Babylonians had a huge influence on the Hebrews during and just before the Babylonian exile, right? So the Assyrians elevated her to become the highest deity in their pantheon, ranking close to their own national god, Ashur. Inanna Ishtar is alluded to in the Hebrew Bible, and she is greatly influenced in the Ugaritic goddess Ashtart, and later the Phoenician goddess Astarte, who in turn possibly influenced the development of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Her worship continued to flourish until its gradual decline between the 1st and 6th centuries of the Common Era in the wake of Christianity. So let me see if I can show the part where it says that she was doobie-doobie-doo. Specifically, I don't have it in front of me here, where it says she was down there for 3 days, but I know it is in here. I'm trying to just go quickly to save you guys some time. to. Oh, that's not going to help. I'm just trying to skim read through this. I'm not picking it up. Moon god, sin. Yeah, you see this as well. So there's all these common names from the gods. Okay, I'm getting too deep in the weeds here. So look into Inanna. She died for 3 days. She was raised again. Look into Dying and Rising Gods, because you get an idea of what I'm talking about here, about these tropes and these stories that just get rehashed. It's very common, very commonplace. There's nothing in the Hebrew Bible that you're going to find as far as ethics go that's unique. Reciprocity, that was well established even in Sumer. Again, goes way back before Jesus' time. When you get into the Old Testament and the Mosaic Law, you can find the origins of that in the Code of Hammurabi. So there's nothing, absolutely nothing ethically that's going to be unique, so to speak, in the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible. As far as these religious tropes, these gods, dying and rising gods, a Messiah, messianic figure, you can find that in things like Zoroastrianism. You can find it in these pagan religions all over the place. So again, there's just nothing that you're going to find that actually would indicate that there was this revelatory religion that's being announced. And here is Christianity. Here's the savior of the world. The issue is, and this is something that I've been studying because I'm having a discussion about free will with A's philosophy, and I've been looking into it from psychology and neurology, from both biology and psychology, and as to hard determinism versus free will versus maybe soft determinism, something in the middle. And one of the things that I came across, Robin, she mentioned Robert Sapolsky to me as a source to look into for this discussion. And I'm so glad she did, because I've been actually looking into a lot of Robert Sapolsky's stuff, and I highly recommend you guys check him out. He's absolutely brilliant. And he is both a primatologist and neurologist. So he studies the brain, and he studies primates. And they've, one of the lectures that he gave, he talked about the reward system, the dopamine system, and how dopamines get released in the brain. And it is that pleasure feeling that we get, right? That makes us feel good. And this comes from a lot of different places, feeling good for accomplishments, things we've accomplished, feeling right about stuff, feeling accepted, so on and so forth. And one of the releases of this dopamine into the brain comes from the sense of reward, right? And so you have the idea comes to mind, then you have the work you put in to accomplish the idea, and then you get the reward as the completed work. And we used to think scientifically that dopamine hit would come after we get the work done, right? That you have the idea, you put in the work, and then you get the reward for the completed work. And that's that dopamine hit. What they found is completely the opposite. What happens is you get the idea and you get the dopamine hit before the work is even done. So the reason this happens is because it's what they call the possibility is what they discovered through different types of experiments. It's the actual possibility, the chance of getting the reward is what gives the biggest dopamine hit. So it's a spike. So you're getting it from dopamine hit from beginning to end. So it's not like you get no dopamine once you've completed the work, but the spike, the peak is at the beginning. Once you get the idea, the challenges in front of you, and you articulate, okay, what's my path going to be before you actually put the work in, that's the spike. And it's because it's the chance that really gives you the biggest hit. And we know this is true because this is exactly how the casinos are set up. Vegas and Reno, Atlanta, they are built on this scientific biological process. That's what keeps people gambling. It's the risk versus reward that gets you that dopamine hit, the highest level of that dopamine hit. Well, how does that relate to what we're talking about today? When you are trying to talk to a religious person about their beliefs, what is it that you're really fighting against? You're fighting against indoctrination, right? Which is difficult. You're fighting against their fears of death, for example, fears of not knowing what their purpose is in life, nihilism and things like that. Fear of social issues, being isolated socially. So there's these fears that we can identify easily. But what you're ultimately fighting against is this dopamine hit. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Okay. That's what you're fighting against. The highest dopamine hit they get is maybe this God exists, maybe it doesn't exist, maybe I'm going to heaven, maybe I'm not. Because every single human being, as much as they say they're convinced of this, the behavior and actions show that 99% of these religious people don't really necessarily think that what they're espousing is true. Now, they might cognitively think they believe it, but their actions are showing that they don't necessarily know for 100%. Because the truth of the matter is if, for example, we'll take this view of Christianity, there's no sin other than blaspheming the Holy Spirit that's unforgivable, which includes self-deletion. It includes things like abortion. Those are all forgivable sins. Okay. It's also known that you don't have to repent of your sins right before you die to get into heaven, because nobody knows when they're going to die. So you have to be a believer in the right thing. You have to have the right faith. You have to say the right words and try your best. Right. But at the end of the day, what saves you is your faith. You're saved by faith, according to Paul. Right. If Christians really believe this, and they talk about how terrible this world is and how wonderful heaven's going to be, they actually believed 100% for a 100% fact that they were going to spend eternity in paradise and that their sins were all forgivable as long as they don't blaspheme the Holy Spirit, they'd be offing themselves all the time. Why not just go to heaven? I mean, you're not going to get rejected. You're going to spend eternity in paradise. Why are you so against abortion? All babies go to heaven. You're doing these babies a favor. Why not sacrifice yourself if you really care about others, even if you did think that God would not forgive you for ending the life of a baby, right? An unborn child. If you thought that was unforgivable, which there's nothing in the scripture that says that, but let's say that's your cop out, right? Why not sacrifice your own eternity to save the eternity of all the babies in the world and just end them all? You'd be saving every single baby in the world. Just end them right now and send them to heaven if that's what you really believe. Well, they don't do this because they ultimately don't really know for sure if they are going to heaven, if there even is a heaven. And that's the dopamine hit that we're fighting against here. So there's so much tied to these beliefs, as we've talked about a lot of times on this channel, when it comes to culture, when it comes to indoctrination, when it comes to arrogance and pride, so on and so forth, community, all these things we've talked about a lot of times. But what I've never really touched on, because I just discovered this now, is this chemical reaction that they're getting from the possibility. That's what you're fighting against. If you convince one of these believers that they are there's no way that this religion is true because there's contradictions in the Bible. It cannot be the inspired divine word of an all-powerful, perfect human, all-knowing God if it's got contradictions in it and it's got errors in it, scientific and historical errors. It can't be the word of it. Can't be true. We're talking about that today in this series, or this failed prophecy series. These prophecies, these messianic prophecies, do not relate to Jesus. We heard Jill come in here try so hard, and he did a great job. He was very polite, and people were mostly polite to him. Johnny got a little heated there, but I think his connection was rough, so he didn't know when Jill was starting to talk or stop talking. So I want to give Johnny the benefit of the doubt, but Jill handled himself like a perfect gentleman. Unfortunately, his arguments were completely baseless. It was engaging in logical fallacies, and he was hiding behind absence of evidence in some cases, argument from authority, appeal to authority in some cases, sharpshooter fallacy. There was another one that I listed earlier that I can't remember, trying to keep up with their conversation. Potentially goalpost shifting. I don't want to accuse Jill of that because I think a lot of that happened organically, but we started out talking about the topic for today. Today's prophecy was about lineages, and we ended up talking about, by the end of it, the census of Quirinius, right, and the birth date of Jesus. I mean, this is just, we touched on, there was Micah 5:2, there was the virgin birth. I mean, it just went all over the place, and nothing ever got nailed down. So that is a bit of kind of goalpost shifting, however that happened, organically or not. And ultimately, what I was witnessing is Jill just have to go into cognitive dissonance. Well, maybe that census started, few hundred years earlier because he wanted to, do this or, it's Mary's lineage because of this, or a stepfather maybe, or what, and just this stuff, there's nothing in the scripture that indicates this is true. He's saying, well, you can't just assume it's wrong. It's like, well, we're just pointing it at, this is the accusation. It's not an assumption. It's a question. It's a criticism. It's an observation. we're asking for the explanation, and the explanation requires an assumption, a presupposition. So you get into this, what's called cognitive dissonance, and they're forced to double down because they're emotionally tied to this. They're chemically, these chemicals that flow within the body naturally, that give us the positive reinforcement, or the, hey, I want to get out of here and abandon this idea because it's not the right idea. All this stuff runs through our brain, through the limbic system of the brain, to the frontal cortex. And we have to wrestle with this stuff. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So deconversion, the chances of deconverting somebody is so small because of all these things I mentioned. So for all of the atheists and agnostics and skeptics who watch my channel or who watch this video, who are former believers, which is the majority of atheists actually are former believers, you guys should give yourselves a really big pat on the back, actually, because you've done something that is statistically so difficult. In fact, almost impossible to do. You've freed your mind to think critically. You've freed your mind to step back from the situation and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong about this, and I need to consider that more seriously. So I'm really, really proud of you guys. I've never been a believer, so I don't have a deconversion story, so I don't get to give myself that kind of credit, but you guys do. And I think most of you who follow this channel that are atheists or agnostics were former believers, and you guys deserve a lot of credit for being willing to step back from the situation, accept the criticism and face the criticism, and then make the rational decision. So I'm just, I guess I'll close on that. I look forward to seeing you guys next week with Dr. Carrier. That is going to be a great show, talking about objective morality. That's right up my alley. And hope to see you guys then. Thank you for stopping by today.
Calculate my odds of getting a big YouTube channel. 3.30 through repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before. And Deacon Brennan, what do you do? Head to the deep at night. Just wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.